Ahoy, everyone! My name is Bobby Shortle, and I'm here with Rocco Scalia, and we are the Intrepid Filmographers. Every mini-series, we chart a course through the full filmography of an under-discussed genre or journeyman filmmaker, and in this expedition, we do our best to try and be explorers, using our years of film knowledge to help guide us, but always being open to discovering new things about the medium we love so much. We are currently embedded in the films of Karyn Kusama, and today we head to Devil's Kettle for her third film, the horror satire Jennifer's Body, and find a Chinese chick to buff our situation. Nick, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm pretty salty tonight. How about you?
Pretty salty. I'm just Jello. I'm not with you right now.
I thought you were going to call me Monostat or Vagisil, which would have been great.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about Jennifer's Body, 2009's Jennifer's Body, written by Diablo Cody, the other important authorial voice, right, in this discussion.
Well, of the first 20 seconds of the show, yeah, we've already started speaking in Cody-isms, so it's going to probably be a lot of that tonight. And what could be more entertaining than two 40-something guys talking in Diablo Cody speak? So, and I'm excited.
What I know is that in the years intervening since her biggest popularity days, people remember her fondly and love to talk about all of the lines like this that are in movies. So Diablo Cody, yes. So Diablo Cody is the writer of this film. And we'll get into talk about Diablo Cody a bit as well. I am really excited to talk about this movie today with you, Nick, because it was a movie I saw back in 2009 when it came out, and I liked it a lot. I think I talked about this. And I think... But at the time, and even in intervening years since, I was kind of like, do I like this? Did I like this a lot then? Because people were so vicious about it when it came out that I was feeling like a contrarian, 20-something-year-old and being like, no, I get it. It's great. Like, I think it's really good. Like, whatever. And in the years since, it kind of just been like, yeah, that movie's really good. And then it got reappraised a couple of years ago. People really coming out and being like, no, this thing is really, really good. And I didn't watch it then. And now watching it, I was really like, man, I remember like 4 things from this movie. Most of them are like visual set pieces are the only things I really remember. And so watching it, although I kind of remembered the general skeleton of what the story was about, it really was like watching it for the first time. And I had a blast last night watching the movie. And we'll get into like the dossier and stuff about what going on with it. But I know last time we were talking about how, you had seen it already and you were like, it was good. And you were not like super, super psyched to be watching again. I don't think you thought it was going to go up in your estimation. How did you feel after watching it?
I thought it actually grew in stature over the years. Like, I remember, I actually have to read you. I got a Facebook, the memories. I don't know. We're not friends on Facebook. We should be. Or maybe no one should be on Facebook anymore. I still am. I got an alert the other day, and it is now September 16th. Sorry to again tell our audience how the sausage is made. But yesterday, on September 15th, I got a 15 years ago memory. And ironically, because I was watching this movie yesterday, it says, I'm shocked at all the bad reviews for Jennifer's Body, but I'm totally going to see it anyway. And I did, opening weekend when it came out. I don't know, you mischaracterized me a little bit there. I remember really liking it when it came out. I remember being very excited for it. I was a big, big fan of Juno, really liked Diablo Cody as a writer, loved that sort of voice that she had. I'm a sucker for snark and sarcasm and wordplay, and that's what she does. I was a big Kevin Smith fan growing up, and what he's become is something completely different from that. But at the time, Clerks and Mallrats and Chasing Amy and those kinds of movies, they were a little bit different, right? They were vulgar, but they were, it was in this weird sort of intelligent, witty kind of way. And look, witty is a very subjective term. I don't know that I would still use that word exactly to describe those movies, but I remember seeing Juno and sort of learning a little bit about Diablo Cody, and I liked her backstory, and her interviews were great, and it was that same kind of sense of humor. So I was really, really pumped for this movie. I also liked, because Juno wasn't really a genre that I cared that much about or liked that. A coming of age sort of movie, and the thought that she was going to do that, but also a horror movie at the same time, like, that seemed like it was going to be a slam dunk, not only for me, but for everybody. Like, this was going to be, this was that band that had the incredible debut, and here's the sophomore effort, and what's it going to be? And I remember seeing the bad reviews, because I guess I posted on Facebook about them. I really shared a lot of my feelings back then. I'm much more guarded as an older person, but I remember being very excited for it. I remember being kind of disappointed by what the critics were thinking of it. I remember thinking, I'm probably going to like this movie anyway. And I did. I will say it had some problems back then. I wasn't, I never called it a 4-star movie, and I still wouldn't. But I think in the intervening years, seeing it again just felt kind of fresh and kind of good. And I think I understood it, like what it was going for, a little bit better this time. And it's really good. And I think, we've had a few sort of brief conversations about it before. I think you and I are going to do our best to sort of resurrect the reputation of this movie. And, they've both gone on to kind of bigger and better things at this point. It was, at the time, pretty big disappointment box office wise, and really kind of both of these careers, which were just getting started, kind of took a hit at the time. And they've both mostly recovered. And I think actually the Diablo Cody movies that came out after this were really good also. I absolutely love Tully, especially, although Young Adult is great too. I haven't seen all of them, but I love those two. And I'm just excited to talk about it. Like, I think this movie was kind of misunderstood. I think it's like, I don't know if we could exactly call it a cult classic, but it's definitely gained some stature in the last few years, just kind of universally. And I think this movie absolutely deserves to be a cult classic. Like, I feel like teenagers should be watching Jennifer's Body years and years and years into the future.
I really completely agree with you on all those points. I think I was a huge Juno fan. Like, the first time I saw the trailer, I am a big like coming of age movie person, and when I saw the trailer for Juno, I had already seen obviously Elliot Page in Hard Candy at that point, and been like, this person is like unbelievable. Like, in a totally, unique energy and style and vibe and look. And then so when the trailer for Juno came out, especially that time of my life, the sort of like indie sort of quirkness I was very locked in to that aesthetic and vibe.
Oh yeah.
Big
indie
big
rock
Michael Cera
soundtracks and all that stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, this one has it too.
Yeah, even at the time, still in my head, Garden State is a seminal film at that point in my mind. So all of this stuff is still going on.
I am afraid to go back and watch that one because I love that movie too.
Yeah, it's fine. Now, I was absolutely obsessed with it back then.
I'll tell you, I hear the shins now, and I was like, did this change my life? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So Juno, the trailer for Juno was absolutely like enthralled by it immediately. Was a fan of Elliot Page already. Loved Michael Cera and Jason Bateman from Arrested Development. Jennifer Garner, J.K. Simmons, like all of these.
So funny in that movie. And I forgot he was in this one. And it took me a minute to recognize him. He's pretty unrecognizable in Jennifer's Body, but it was so good to see him. And he made me laugh so hard in this movie too. I love that guy anyway, but particularly playing Juno's dad. It's one of my favorite roles. There are some lines that he has in that movie that like, they just kill me every time.
Yeah. And I saw that movie. I can't remember what theater I saw it for in the city because I was going to grad school at the time when it came out. It was one day when I was like one of my days where I had like a late class, so I would see like 3 movies in a day or whatever, and that Juno was one of those movies, and absolutely adored it. And really, even one of those things where it obviously steamrolled its way to winning. She won Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars, and this. Cinderella Story obviously takes Elliot Page and sort of skyrockets them to superstardom, and then of course the backlash comes. The backlash comes fast for Juno, right? It makes a ton of money, and then and everyone loves it, and then all of a sudden people start picking it apart, right? They pick apart the language, they pick apart all of that stuff. Especially it really focused on Diablo Cody and her script writing, and I think by the time this movie comes out, even though it's her second movie, I think a lot of people already have their hackles up for being like, I don't want any more of this, of this kind of you're so jello, high monostat, bullshit. Right? No more hamburger phones. Like, we're already done with it.
No more fertile myrtle. Yeah, I was ready for it. I was definitely down for it.
At this point.
Like, I think we've talked about this on the show before. Like, I'm not one of those people that's always looking out for sexism. And maybe that's me. Maybe I'm a misogynist for not seeing it everywhere. But I felt like at the time, like, okay, so Diablo Cody comes out, this woman screenwriter, wins the Oscar, like you said. And it's like, how much of that, and again, Karyn Kusama's talked about this a little bit too, like how much harder it was, particularly at the time, for a female filmmaker to just come out and have this career. And it's like, yeah, like Diablo Cody kind of had it by the short and curlies, but she, I don't know what it was. Like, was it because she was a woman that like, okay, we're going to immediately, like, we're turning our backs on her right away. I don't mean me, because I was pumped for Jennifer's body. And like, I know other people who were, but I do remember kind of the like very quick, as you said, this backlash to her. And I didn't get it, you know? And I guess because her style is so distinctive and so easy to sort of parody and make fun of and make sound like something that's not as intelligent or just not as entertaining as it is, maybe. Like it's a very easily parodied style, I guess.
It is, of course it is. And I mean, but I think it's also, it's two for one. I think you're right. I think her sex definitely has something to do with it. Two, I think, unlike someone like, you know, I think two very comparable people to her writing style, right, are Kevin Smith, like you spoke about. Even though I think she's probably a better writer than Kevin Smith and Joss Whedon, right? These are two.
Well, it turns out that she is quite a bit better writer than.
But these are two people that I think very much fit into this vibe of like very manicured, very specific language, lots of references, lots of people speaking in ways they don't really speak to get across a feeling and a tone and a sense of intelligence and sharpness, you know, with that. And I think those two people, obviously both men, so that's one thing. Two, sort of, they didn't, at that time, it took a very long, I mean, it really never happened for Kevin Smith, but it took a very long time for either one of those people to break through, right? They were always sort of like indie darlings, right? They were like, okay, only the cool people know how good these people are at doing this thing. And if only Hollywood just give these people a chance, like they could do something great. And she broke out so big, so fast, and was so all over the place that I think there was a big backlash to that as well. I think it was a two-pronged thing. I think people were like, she was a stripper and a blogger or whatever, and that was the big thing with her or whatever, and then she became big, and there's always that group of people, and it happened with Kevin Smith too, obviously on a smaller scale, because he wasn't as, he didn't get nominated for an Oscar, he didn't have a movie that made $150 million at the box office, where people were like, I don't get it. Like they do the same shit I was doing, and now they're famous and rich, and I'm not. And I think that is something that it's a real thing that people get angry about. I think less so now because so many people get famous out of nowhere, you know, from kind of organically, that it's become much more normal. But I think at that point there was still felt like such a hard wall to get into notoriety, into Hollywood, into movie making, whatever, that I think people got really angry when someone broke through really fast. Right. And with such a personality. Right. I think the pairing of the writing being so full of personality and her herself being so full of personality and being out there so much, I think really, really caused something. And then, of course, that's all Susaned into a beautiful dish of sexism as well.
Yeah, I mean, this
when
is
you
like
put it all together,
pre-Gamergate times, a few years before that. But it reminds me in some ways a little bit of that just sort of like sexist backlash just to have a sexist backlash. Like, we cannot let this woman do this thing for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when they had the female Ghostbusters and people decided that it was the most important thing in the world to be angry about. You know what I mean? It's like, even however you feel about the movie, whatever, you're treating it like this is like someone is, you know, killing your mom on live television, that this is happening. Yeah. So it's sort of the same sort of soup of stuff, right? That's happening in this sort of era. And, you know, I think, I haven't seen all of Diablo Cody's movies either. Obviously, right after this, she does United States of Terra as well. She's doing a TV show on Showtime. I think that show was on.
Which I've never seen. And
I've never seen it either. It's the Toni Collette, like schizophrenia, multiple personality movie show. Sorry. And 2 years later, she does Young Adult, which I think is brilliant, right? I think it's fantastic. I think Theron, someone we talked about last week, obviously, is wonderful in that movie. And I really haven't seen much since then.
You didn't see Tully?
I haven't seen Tully.
Tully's fantastic.
One day I will make it a point to watch the other movies of hers I haven't seen.
Yeah, there's a couple. She directed one called Paradise. I was just sort of looking at her filmography, and I'm like, I think it was like 2013. Like, how did that pass me by? I was very interested in her work at the time. And
yeah, she wrote Ricky and the Flash, Jonathan Demme's
last that either. Yeah,
film as well. You know, so she's one of those people I think obviously has maintained and stayed around for 20 years, or not 20 years, 15 years. But I think really burned so bright in this very beginning period that I think some people feel like I think you've asked a lot of people, they would only think of her as working in this era and not after, right? I don't think a lot of people think of her career because she definitely receded, I think for many reasons, probably receded back into the background and just kind of more became just, I'm just a writer, right? At a certain point. And there, wasn't going on late night talk shows, wasn't really putting herself front and center all of the time.
Well, that was the other thing about her, right? Like screenwriter as celebrity is not a thing that you see very often. And it was. No. It's this very outsized personality. She was really good on those talk shows, right? Like you think of writers, even very witty, very funny writers that write characters who are very charismatic. Usually you get them in an interview setting and it's like they either want to just drone on for hours like I do, or they're just, very introspective and they're not good in front of an audience. And she was like, she had that, like she could have been, if she wanted to be in her movies, which she is, she does like little Hitchcock style cameos and things. She's in Jennifer's Body, but like she could have been a bigger celebrity, and it's kind of too bad. Like I always liked the idea of screenwriters kind of being elevated because I've done more writing than I've done directing. Not that anyone's seen anything that I've ever done, but I just sort of like that idea that person who is, typically thought of as just like an introspective person locked up in a room for days on end, writing stuff to be sort of on the talk shows and on the E network and doing that kind of stuff. Is that even still a thing? Do they still have E? They have to, right?
I don't think the E network exists anymore.
No? Like when Joan Rivers died, they were just like, nope, we're done here.
I think it probably got like subsumed into one of those other
that's heartbreaking. Like, I mean, I haven't watched it since like the late 90s.
Bravo.
But I'm still sad. I hate to see things go.
I mean, Bravo probably took its place in many ways.
Maybe. Oh, I don't know. Now I'm just gonna be sad.
There aren't very many celebrity screenwriters. I mean, like Aaron Sorkin is definitely one of them, right?
William Goldman to some extent. Yeah.
Yes,
Harmony Korine.
Sorkin, I'm talking in modern times, is like who did you say?
Harmony Korine, although he's a director too.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like Patty Chayefsky, like those kind of people were huge at that time. I'm talking about the modern time.
Yeah,
like,
definitely not many now. Sure.
It doesn't really happen. You have to be kind of a writer director for that to really happen in now,
which is a little unfair.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me. Her sort of rise and fall does remind me a little bit of like Taika Waititi, who I feel like 4 years ago, had like all the goodwill you could possibly imagine.
He's like
for a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And now it's like everyone's like, get the fuck out of here, man. We don't want to deal with your shit anymore. So it's just really funny that those things happen so fast. But let's jump into the dossier really quick. There's not, I want to get into the meat of the movie, but I want to talk about a couple of things. So she was writing this script at the same time she was writing Juno. Influenced by The Lost Boys. She said Cody saw her script as a feminist take on 80s horror teen tropes, which, I mean, she nailed it because you did this dossier. I was watching the movie last night and made a note. I was like, it's like they made an 80s movie in the 2000s. This is what I wrote in my notes.
In a lot of ways, and in a lot of very good ways.
Yeah. And I'm going to skip over some of these quotes because I want to bring up the points when we're talking about the movie, and I'll bring them back up. One of the things I did, the first thing I noticed, it's released by Fox Atomic, which is like one of those things that like slingshotted me back in time.
Yeah. I saw it in the opening credits, and I was like, Fox Atomic, that was a thing once, wasn't it?
Yeah, for like 3 years.
Yep. But there was this Dimension
era.
Pictures just didn't last as long and was not as successful.
Yeah, this was that era, right, where every company was like, we've got a shingle that's all about the real shit, like all
the teen genre stuff, the Dimension Pictures.
But not even just teen genre, the grimy. It was like the grimy, like thing, because it's like their movie. They released only a few movies, and they were the Turistas. They were Turistas, The Hills Have Eyes 2, 28 Weeks Later, The Comebacks, The Rocker, Miss March, and 12 Rounds.
Oh man, I forgot. I just saw Miss March like 3 days ago.
Wow, okay. That's so funny. They're brought up. And then they, I Love You, Beth Cooper, Post Grad, and Jennifer's Body. Jennifer's Body was like the last one, basically, that came out under the Fox Atomic label.
Oh wow, I didn't see that. So this like bankrupted that sub.
Well, no, they were already the shingle was already shuttered by the time the movie came out.
Okay.
Basically, 3 movies came out. All the movies that came out in 2009 that were kind of produced under that shingle, the shingle was already closed by the time they came out. So
it had the same president as Fox Searchlight at the time, but like Fox Searchlight is your prestige Oscar.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Atomic is like, here's Miss March.
Yes, exactly. And we're gonna make comic books, and they're gonna have Fox Atomic comic books. This was a thing at this point in kind of movie making, where we keep talking about this, we're kind of out of the indie boom, right? But now studios want to capitalize on everyone's sort of residual love for the indie boom. So they're like, let's make all these little tiny companies, this kind of tiny shingles that will be like our indie shingle, right? And we'll have our like prestigious one, like you said, Fox Searchlight. That's what Focus Features is, right? These are like these kind of things. And then let's also have like our Dimension is obviously ahead of the game when it comes out. That's one of the first of these, right? Dimension Films, Fox Atomic, these kind of like genre shingles, right? Of these big studios, because they don't want to put out, they don't want to put out this under the Fox, the 20th Century Fox label.
Right.
That's not what it is.
It's not big enough for Fox. It's also not like prestigious enough for Searchlight. So you do this kind of thing. I don't know.
I'm
like
sure Juno.
The business is not this at all anymore, and it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. But it also feels like it was like 100 years ago. Like this is a thing you'd never see again, and we'll never see again.
No, definitely not. No, definitely not. I mean, I think was Juno a Fox Searchlight film?
I think it was. It was definitely one of those.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know if it necessarily was, but. So it comes out.
Yeah, thank you for smoking and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
he's a producer on this movie, right? On this movie, obviously he directed Diablo Cody's first movie, Juno, and he said we want to make unusual films, and anything that turns the genre on its ear, Dan and I are in. So that was his partner Dan DeBecke. They kind of set up this movie. Megan Fox was in talks before Karyn Kusama signed on and was officially cast in October 2007. Kusama signed as director in January 2008 based on the strength of Cody's script. Kusama said the movie's online. I was blessed to read the script at a moment where producers were meeting with directors, and it just knocked me out. It was just so original, so imaginative. That's what it is. That's what it is about this script and the world, is that it feels like a fairy tale gone psycho. And I think that's what most fairy tales actually started as. She said, I just thought this is totally the movie I would have wanted to see when I was 16, and I need to make it for 16-year-olds now. And then Amanda Seyfried is cast in February 2008. The movie cost $16 million. K&B FX, which is obviously one of the most famous physical
Howard
practical
Berger
effects
and
companies.
Greg Nicotero, those guys sling some blood around pretty beautifully.
The Walking Dead, now probably their most famous, right? Work.
Yeah, it's just before that.
Yeah, filmed in British Columbia. The soundtrack is filled with bands like Panic at the Disco, Black Kids, Hole, and we'll talk about this stuff we go through, because there's stuff about the kissing scene and stuff like that. And I love Kusama's line. She said, I just sort of had to keep reminding people, guys, we can't market this movie to boys. Like, that's not what this movie, you can't make this movie for boys. This is not the kind of movie that it is. It will, that's what she was saying. So
interesting story, right? Like, she was not at war with the producers here, but she was definitely at war with, like, there was definitely some contention, as there was with her last film. Mm-hmm. But like with this one, it's not with the studio, it's not with the producers. Nobody's trying to recut this on her. Although there is a longer director's cut that I now really want to see. But she was adamant about marketing this movie like this is a movie for women, for young women, and we're not gonna like advertise this as a high school sex comedy horror thing. And yet that is exactly how they marketed this movie. I remember that very, very distinctly. Uh-huh. And again, this is Megan Fox at a time when she was known for Transformers, for the leering gaze of Michael Bay's camera on her in those first two Transformers movies. And it was like very big of a deal that she exited that franchise and kind of said some things about Michael Bay and the way she was treated and what she was forced to do. And she didn't want to be a sex symbol. And she kind of was, those movies, that's all she was. Like, I teach a little bit of Laura Mulvey in my film classes, and inevitably I show that scene where she's introduced in the original Transformers, where it's just like, a 12-second butt shot before we see her face. And, many, many years later, she's like perfectly exemplifying Laura Mulvey's theory of the male gaze. So the point here was to, not only do all those things we talked about, like to sort of do this horror thing in the modern era, but also to give Megan Fox a career that's a little more, just a more respectable career than, she's than a Maxim pinup girl in a Michael Bay movie kind of thing.
Yeah. Kusama says that, she says, after the movie was released, she says, I see now how it is really important to push back on the poster, the trailer, the press notes. It's really important to have that dialogue with people who are getting your movie out into the world to see if they see the same movie. Because I realized with Jennifer's Body too late, oh my God, we don't.
And if you look at those materials, if you look at the trailer for this and you look at the DVD cover and the poster and everything, it's very much that early 2000s PG-13 teenage horror movie thing, like the look of it. And this movie's not that at all. Like I would, we'll get into this, but I mean, this is barely a horror movie. Like it does have a little bit of gore. It has some blood and guts. It does kind of follow the horror movie playbook to some extent, but there's nothing scary in this movie. Like this is not meant to be, like it's almost Halloween time now when this show comes out. It'll be New Year's or something like that. But, I was kind of watching this, like I didn't remember that. Like I remember it having a little bit more like a foot, a little bit deeper on the horror side of things. And it's really not that at all, but it was promoted as pretty much, this was the scream or the disturbing behavior of its generation. And it's really not.
That's exactly right. No. And I think, I'm watching the movie, right? And there were, at the time when I watched it and even liked it, I think I thought of it as more as just like, that was an okay horror movie. Like I liked it, and now watching it now, I'm like, how, even let's forget about the marketing and all this kind of stuff, right? It's just so funny when people lock in their brains to what they expect from something. Yeah. When they go to see it, even if what is presented to them is boldly and baldly not the thing they expected, they sort of grade it in their heads based on the thing that they expected to see. Because I cannot, for the life of me, imagine seeing this movie in the movie theater in 2009 and not understanding that it's a comedy while you're watching it. Because that's a lot of what the negativity towards the movie was like it was like it was not understanding that the filmmakers and people in the movie were in on the joke. Yeah. That stuff that they were saying and doing was ridiculous or lame or meant to be stupid. All of these things to weird, people making terrible decisions. All of this kind of stuff is on purpose to send up this genre and send up also sort of, a beautiful woman, especially a beautiful woman's place in society and how she's looked at and how she's treated. And the title of the movie is extremely pointed, right? The fact that it is the movie's title, she's not in, it's not like the movie is like this subtle allegory. It's like, it is extremely pointed
in this movie.
No,
at all. Subtlety is not a thing that we get here. Yeah, it's a satire. It's in the tradition of things like Heathers and if you remember the movie Jawbreaker, that was like a film similar to this, of sort of dark comedy set in high school about the same kinds of things that came out when I was in high school. So, that was maybe our generation's Jennifer's Body or our generation's Heathers. I don't remember if that movie was good. I remember Marilyn Manson had a cameo in it, and that was kind of fun. But
I don't remember it was good either.
I remember liking Ruth McGowan's in it, I think.
She is.
I think it was good. I remember liking it at the time. Maybe I'll have to revisit that one.
Drop Dead Gorgeous is another one of these movies.
For sure. This was kind of like the 2009 version of that. I was going to say early 2000s, but not really. But it's starting to show its age a little bit. But and appreciated on that level, I think it works exceptionally well.
Yeah, I just don't understand how there is a scene in this movie where J.K. Simmons wearing one hell of a wig.
I love that wig
with a hook hand.
Yep.
Speaking in a insane accent.
I love that guy so much.
Comes across a teenage boy's guts being eaten by a deer and says something to the effect of "Holy Mother." And I'm like, someone saw this and thought, oh, they're really seriously trying to convey this person is terrified of this moment that's happening. It's like, it's just so obvious that it's supposed to be funny. And of course, if you don't find it funny, that's totally fine. But I think that there's just nothing about this to me that reads like you should be taking this as a serious horror play. It just is
not at all. And even
like
I said, I mean, there's a little bit of splatter in this movie. K&B effects, you don't bring them on to make your comedy, right? But I like even that stuff is played mostly for laughs. It's not played like no one's going to be grossed out by this movie. Like I think unless you've never seen a horror movie before.
When she throws up the blood, it's a little gross.
Oh, it's way less. It's it's a tenth of what we get in The Exorcist or something like that.
Well, of course.
No, I don't mean volume wise. I just mean
you went all the way to The Exorcist.
Well, there's a lot of projectile vomiting in that movie.
Yes, I know, but
that's just my reference point for projectile vomiting. I will say, like, you made a good point there about some of the over the top, the reactions and the decision making and stuff like that. I will say there are moments in this. I mean, if I have to criticize this movie about anything, and this is on Diablo Cody, like she's the only credited writer, there are moments where I think that's taken way too far, and it tonally goes past where this movie needs to be. And I'm thinking of it right now, where Adam Brody, like, right after the fire, where he's like swigging whiskey out of like a glass and, encounters Jennifer and Needy outside, like there's a way to play that scene that fits the tone of the movie that doesn't we get that he's a shitbag. And I think it's almost just a shorthand that's unnecessary. They're like little mechanical things like that in the script that just seem, like she was going to put in something better and then just decided not to. So it's like, we'll just do this. And I think if a few of those things could be ironed out, this could be pretty close to a 4-star movie for me. Like, I really, really do like this.
Now, you talking 4 out of 4 or 4 out of 5?
No, I'm talking 4 out of 4. I really, really liked it. But there's a few moments. There's a few.
We have different scales.
Lines.
It's a 4 out of 5.
I'm a Roger Ebert guy, so yeah, 4 stars.
Okay,
yeah. 4 stars is the best you can do.
Get on the letterbox train.
I tried. I've tried so many times. I can't keep up. Do you agree though? I mean, I think tonally this script mostly hits the right marks, and I think it does the right thing. I just think sometimes it swings a little too hard, or there's just something, I don't know. It's very ambitious, but there are moments that feel very unambitious. Like, I just need to get to the next scene, so I'm just going to do this, and we'll I think a better movie, and maybe Kusama could have stepped in there and like, how about we play this slightly differently?
Well, first of all, I don't think Kusama's coming to this from a position of strength as a director, because she just came off of one of the biggest flops in recent memory. But I will say this: I do agree with you that the reason this is a 4-star movie for me out of 5 and out of 4.5 or a 5 is that I do feel like sometimes the script does things I don't like. Most of that stuff, honestly, is just like 7 out of 10, Diablo Cody lines I'm in for. And then there's like 3 out of 10 where I'm like, you could have done without this line in this moment.
I remember
that's most of the stuff that really.
Let's move on.org. I was like,
yes, exactly.
That's
shit like that.
So poorly. Like, even at the time, that was already a little dated. And now it's like, oh yeah, move on.org. That was a thing.
It's like the oh my blog or whatever, from Juno or whatever. Yep. So like there's stuff like that. That's really stuff. The stuff you're talking about with Adam Brody. We'll talk about specifically in 1 second. I just want to quickly some people might be listening to this and not watching the movie, and I just want to quickly sort of like do a quick plot synopsis of the movie, which is that it's a high school movie. Megan Fox plays someone named Jennifer Check, who is like the pretty, hot cheerleader girl in school, and she's best friends with this sort of like, for the movies, nebbish girl played by named Needy.
One of those librarian-like characters that just needs to take her hair down and the glasses off, and she's just as good looking as
played by Amanda Seyfried. And they have this, they've been friends since they were kids, and they have this very complicated, teenage girl relationship where the power dynamic is definitely very much flopped onto one side. They go to this bar to watch this band that Jennifer is like really wants to like hook up with the lead singer. The lead singer is Adam Brody. He ends up being this like satanic worshiper, and they kill Jennifer. They sacrifice her devil, thinking she's a virgin, but because she's not a virgin, instead of her getting sacrificed, she comes back in kind of inhabited by this demon and goes on a killing spree. And that's how the movie plays out, right?
Boy, you nailed it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Not the most complicated movie plot wise.
Yeah. No. But I think to its benefit,
absolutely.
Right? It's very, and I think this is the same thing with Juno, same thing with Young Adult. She's very good at laser focusing on a concept and an idea, and really not having superfluous stuff around that concept and idea. Right? This movie is like a tight 140. I think it is like exactly as long as it needs to be. There are little things like the devices and stuff that I would, and I think like the beginning in media res, like where we kind of begin at the end of the movie. I think it's fine because like the movie is not trying to put you in suspense. It's not trying to scare you, like we said.
Like the opening of this reminds me a little of John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, which is a movie I love very much. But that one, you really want to know how that character ended up locked up in that kind of institution and what the path was there. And this one is pretty obvious kind of right from the get-go. It does start kind of in the same place and gives it like really, is Amanda Seyfried really the star of this movie? I mean, she's got more screen time, I think, than Megan Fox, and
she's the lead of this movie.
She is the lead
for sure.
Yeah,
she's the lead.
The character with the arc, and I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of like this is always going to be the Megan Fox movie, and yet like this basically launched her career too, and she's gone on to bigger and better things from this, and she's recovered from its failure pretty well.
She's in Mean Girls before this, Amanda Seyfried. True. She's building her career at this point. This is like a step on her career. And let's talk a little bit about performances here. I think that Seyfried is good in this movie, right? And I wrote this down. I think she's great at the really hardcore sort of emotional stuff. Like when she used to sell like real, genuine emotion stuff, I think she's great. That's her strength as an actress. She's got a lot of vulnerability and she's able to sell big emotional stuff. I also think she's good at the nebbish stuff. I think she's just good at playing it. Like she's good at playing against her looks because her looks are so particularly movie star looks, right? That they're not like Megan Fox is this like, she was like made in the lab by scientists to be attractive. You know, that's what it feels like. And I'm not even talking about plastic surgery. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just like in a metaphorical sense. Yep. You know, Amanda Seyfried, you know, she's got giant eyes and like, obviously she's gorgeous, but she's able to hide it a little bit more just because, you know, she isn't like this like model looking person like Megan Fox is. And I think in the nebbish stuff, she plays it pretty well. You know, I believe when she's shy, I believe sort of like the anxiety stuff. The stuff where I feel like she does not succeed is the stuff that, Elliot Page was so good at in Juno, which is like the sassy, like quick-witted.
Yeah, I could see that.
Sharp, like, you know, thought a minute, like thought a second. I'm the smartest person in the room stuff, which they don't ask her to do too much, but there are sections of this movie.
It's a Diablo Cody movie, so she's going to have to do some of it. Everyone's going to have to do some of it, whether they're capable of it or not. Yeah. And
I don't think that's Amanda Seyfried's fastball, right? I think that her earnestness is really what she's really great at on screen.
And there's kind of a lot of that in this movie. Like as silly as it is and as over the top as it is, like there are, you know, these outsized high school emotions I think really shine through in this. And that's one of the things I like about it as well. It's why I think it's actually a very good movie and a kind of a misunderstood movie. Like the feeling she has toward Jennifer and the feeling she has toward what's her boyfriend's name in this?
Oh my God, I don't know, but it's young Neil from Scott Pilgrim.
Is it Chip? I think it's Chip.
I think it's Chet.
Something like that. He's the nice kid. You know, they're a perfect couple, but you know, Chip, yeah, and she's
Chip Dove.
Chip Dove. What a great name. The names in this are fantastic. Well, they're either fantastic or they're totally cringe, but I actually think they're fantastic. They fit the movie. But I like that relationship too. You know, is she too good for him? Does she want to be more like Jennifer? Like those are. You know, there's a lot of humanity. I think there's a lot of, you know, as I said, that sort of teenage, like every decision you make is like the most important thing in the world. That kind of like very emo young person kind of feeling this movie has. And she's very good at that stuff. I agree.
She is. And I think I think what this movie does really well, like you were saying, is the scares, right? Or like the horror stuff is right. It's all metaphor. It's all allegory for the story she wants to tell, which is about, you know, teenage relationships, how you grow and change.
Exactly.
You know, and also how society treats young women, especially, and you know, how they turn them against each other, how, you know, when they really need help, there's no one really there to help them, all of this kind of stuff, right? And I think what I like about the Chip kind of relationship is that it's like it's one of the things where like, yes, he's really important to her, but he's not more important to her than the friend she's had for her entire life, right? And it's very much a high school thing, right? You kind of have to make you are asked to make these really distinct choices a lot of the time between, well, what are you going to do? You're going to hang out with the boyfriend or the girlfriend, or are you going to hang out with your friend?
For like, totally arbitrary reasons, right? Like he is not of the social strata, although Jennifer is an interesting character in this. Like she's the cheerleader. She's obviously the best looking person in school, but like she doesn't have any other friends really. She's just kind of like banging all the guys, but like we never see her in any kind of like, usually these movies are about like the popular girls, like the clique, right? Like the mean girls. And there really are none in this movie, right? Like it is Jennifer and there's nobody else. And her best friend is this nerd, this nebbishy girl, Needy, which is such a great name. Again, a little on the nose, but this is Diablo Cody that she does that stuff very well. And I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic too. Like we don't get that thing like, this has a lot in common with the sort of traditional high school satirical, class war sort of movies, but also it kind of deviates from that in some very interesting ways. Yeah, it sees all this stuff through a lens that's sort of clouded by horror, by blood and guts stuff, but it's not really, like if I had to guess, I would say Diablo Cody's probably not much of a horror fan. Like the thing she liked about The Lost Boys is the coming of age stuff and not the vampire stuff.
Right. Yeah.
You could kind of say the same about Joel Schumacher.
Yeah, probably. So yeah, I think Seyfried is for me like the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie. Sorry, it's getting most of my internet connection unstable. Can you still hear me?
Perfectly. MCU as well.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm just getting some like a weird notice or something. Okay, cool. So the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie, I think, are Seyfried's weakest points, right? Where she's asked to do those things that we're talking about she's not good at.
I'm not sure I buy her kicking that orderly in the face either.
No, that's stuff I just don't buy. She just isn't. She just doesn't bring it in that same way. Yeah. Like if that was Elliot Page, I totally would buy it.
Yeah, I think so. Sure.
Even with a smaller stature or whatever, I still buy it, right? And I think that I really like I think that's where the movie. The beginning of the movie, I was like. The very beginning of the movie, when the whole section are going on, I was like, okay, like I'm not like 100% sure I'm gonna like this as much as I thought I was gonna like this. And then once we were into the meat of the movie, I was fine.
Well, there's a montage that like when we first flash back, right? So we start in the mental hospital and we see like what Needy has become. And, there's the intimation that there's been killings and she was somehow involved in them and everything like that. And then we get this, like the world building and just the way this is set up. It's like, and this is on Karyn Kusama, right? Like, I'm sure this was in the script, but just like the pacing of this movie is incredible. Like you said, it's a very tight hour and 40 minutes. Yeah. And like there is not a boring second. It's all interesting. No. And I love
all killer, no filler.
This
all killer, no filler.
Song is such a product of that time. Black Kids. It's called, the band is Black Kids. The song is called something like I'm not going to teach your boyfriend how to dance with you or something like it's a very long title and, like a Fall Out Boy style title, which Fall Out Boy is referenced in this movie, which I'm very happy about. I love Fall Out Boy.
There's a poster in there.
Right behind Jennifer in the opening scene. But this montage set to that song, which is such a, that got like a 10.0 in Pitchfork at the time. And I was like, that deserved it. I've listened to that song constantly.
It's called I'm Not Going to Teach Your Boyfriend to Dance. That is what the name of the show,
okay.
the song is.
Close. I love that montage so much. Like it sets up the world of this movie beautifully in like a couple of minutes, and the energy of that song and the cinematography. This is a great looking movie. Like
I wrote that in my notes. I was like, oh my god, this movie looks sweet.
The lighting and just that like saturated color that this has, and the camera loves Megan Fox. I think she has terrific screen presence in this. I mean, she's not a great actor, but like in the right kind of scene and in the right kind of moment, and shot the way, like this is what I want to see of Megan Fox, not the Michael Bay leering Maxim magazine stuff. But Karyn Kusama gets how to shoot Megan Fox, and I think she uses her very, very well throughout this movie. And we get that right from this opening montage. And I think 5-10 minutes into this, I was just about to text you and be like, man, this movie's really, really good, and I'm glad I still like it as much as I did.
Megan Fox rules in this movie. She is so good. She is the opposite, right, of what I said about Seyfried with that type of dialogue. She nails it. Yeah. And I think, right, you're saying she's not a great actress. There's no dispute about that, right? But there have been times in her career where she is used correctly, and there are plenty of movie stars and screen presence who are like this. When they have the right director, the right writing, the right character, they can be truly great, and she is great in this movie. There is not a false moment for me when she's speaking. She delivers all those lines perfectly. Yeah. And she is great at playing all the levels too of Jennifer, because this is what I like about the Jennifer character, right? Is there are the moments where she's at like her full tilt, where she says she's full, right? And she's like at full tilt, hottie,
Yeah.
mean girl,
way overconfident. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
way
I can
overconfident.
take on the world, like literally invincible. She can cut her arm open and it just heals back
Yeah.
up, Wolverine style. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when she's super low, where she's,
Yeah, there's a great moment. Like, I think this movie knows it too, right? Like, I think it's self-aware enough. Like when she says she's having like a bad hair day and her skin's all pale or something, but she still looks like Megan Fox. And like,
I mean, Seyfried makes that joke. Needy makes it. She says like she doesn't, she
for Jennifer.
For Jennifer, and and there's this moment, and there's a quote right from I think it's Diablo Cody in the dossier, and I pointed out in my notes. There's a scene near the end where we're kind of getting to the final climax of the movie, where when she hasn't fed in a while on a human, she starts like her skin gets pale, her eyes get bloodshot, she looked gaunt, and she's kind of putting this makeup on in the mirror, and there's just one moment. She's going to like planning on killing somebody, right? But there's one moment where she kind of stops and looks in the mirror and has this moment where she just kind of looks sad.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't want to do this. Like I have to do this, but I don't want to do this. And it's a great moment from her. It's a great little moment from her. And I think,
and it's so meta and self-reflexive, right? Like, think of who Megan Fox is when this movie comes out. Like, she is Jennifer. Like, I mean, maybe it's such a great performance because there's a lot of her. And again, I'm psychoanalyzing a person that I will never meet and will never get to know. But I do feel like, she's kind of channeling a lot of the, this is the time of TMZ and Perez Hilton. And it feels like so long ago. Like, again, I know I say that a lot, but like, this is recent history that feels like ancient history. Mm-hmm. But like all of that sort of nasty internet commentary, and this is the pre-Me Too era. And I was just reading some things, some of the modern, the reevaluations of this movie kind of look at it in light of what happened with Weinstein in 2017 and the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. And the movie looks better in this era because of that. But like, think about when this is coming out and what she was dealing with and what this movie was supposed to be. I mean, there's a whole other like meta narrative about this movie that I think is happening within it. That's fascinating, maybe even more fascinating than the movie. But yeah, she's so good here. And she uses so much of that in this movie. And it really sucks that this movie was not more successful because like I was looking at, watching this, I was like, man, Megan Fox is so good here. And I've always just kind of been dismissive of her as an actor. And it's like, well, what has she been in? And I'm looking over these movies. I haven't seen any of them. She did a couple of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. She played April. So I guess she's
terrible in those movies, but that's a terrible casting for her. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, why, this is all a disaster. Why did you make these decisions? Like that is basically what it is.
I understand, it's a popular franchise and it's a good character and I get it. But like, I mean, she's really not made much of note since Jennifer's Body. And it's like, that's not fair. And, terrible decision to spend your life with Machine Gun Kelly, but
she's a professional famous person now. That's kind of like what she is, right? She's still famous. Sure. Everyone knows who Megan Fox is still. There's not a person who doesn't know who Megan Fox is, right? But she's kind of professionally famous. She's had little spurts, like she had a little guest spot on New Girl when Zooey Deschanel was out because she was pregnant. She's having a baby. And she's like the new roommate for like 6 episodes, 7 episodes, something like that. And she's really good on it. Her energy really works. It's the same thing. The character is written perfectly for her. Whoever's directing her is doing a really good job, and she fits in really well with the chemistry of the show. And it just like every moment here, like whether she's being funny or bitchy or vulnerable or scary, really feel like it works. And I was really impressed because even back then, I was like, I kind of was, I was whatever on Megan Fox, and like I was like, I'm sure she's not as bad as Michael Bay makes her seem in those movies. That's kind of how I always felt about her, right? Like there's probably something there, right? But when I saw that, I was like, she was fine, and I did not appreciate, I think, how good she was back then as now. That was the biggest thing for me. I was waiting to be like, okay, like she has moments in this, but she's the weak link, and she was she without her the movie doesn't work, and I don't think that there are many other people at this time in this era who could do exactly what she's doing in this, right? It's like a special combination of, like you said, meta, context, and her certain proclivities as a performer that make it work.
Yep.
And I think it's one of the things that should really be appreciated, and really liked her a lot in it. I will say Adam Brody we talked last week about actors you put in things who are just good at talking bullshit, and you put them in something and they just make it a little better. They just make it a little bit better. And that's who Adam Brody is. And he's like that in this movie too. He shows up playing like the classic Adam Brody
it's
part.
Such a silly character, but yeah, but it also is, again, like, kids nowadays, like, they don't really like what indie rock was in the early 2000s, and like bands that are kind of like this band in this movie, these very earnest, kind of wannabe Coldplay bands with the eyeliners. And look, you'll never find a bigger Fall Out Boy, My Chemical. I listened to a lot of stuff, but like, I was writing about music at the time. As I mentioned last episode, I was working for a little arts and entertainment magazine, and I was just all on board for emo stuff like that. And, this was Black Kids. That song was just constantly on repeat for me. And so they were so like the parody of that, I think, is so spot on. And the idea that like, these earnest indie rock boys would also be Satan worshipers was so funny to me at the time, because I was so into, so many bands that sounded like this. And the thought that they're just, these nakedly ambitious, like, we'll sell our souls to the devil to be the next, whatever, My Chemical Romance or something, was so funny to me. And, it's less relevant now, but still really funny.
It is less relevant as far as just the specific band thing. But I will tell you this. Oddly, the night before I watched this, I started like my to date this podcast list. I started my like Shocktober sort of like, I try to do like 31 movies before Halloween, and I started it this week, the middle of September when we're recording this, just to get a head start, because I know I won't be able to watch a movie a night. So let's try to like give myself the best chance of finishing it. And the night before I watched this, I watched Bodies, 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 which is this. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's
I want to. I have to get past Pete Davidson so I can see it, because I've heard it's good.
It is good. It's like this horror comedy type of thing, and it has a lot of parallels to this movie in many ways, because it's not a movie that's particularly scary, right? But it's a movie that is 100% satiring modern culture and the way modern culture works and the way people talk in modern culture and the way people weaponize, mental health speak, and the way all these kind of things that obviously you're not satiring in 2009, because that wasn't the world then. No. But they have a very similar vibe, and I think are kind of similarly misunderstood as well. People like Bodies, Bodies, Bodies more now because people are more attuned to that kind of stuff. But I still think there's a section of people who see that movie and go, well, this isn't scary. I don't understand. Like, it's kind of stupid at times. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the point. And there's a person in that movie who talks about how hard it is to be a podcaster. And it really reminded me of this. There's this whole scene where Adam Brody's character is like, do you know how hard it is to try to break in to be in a band anymore? Like, it goes this whole spiel about like what it's like before he does like this crazy sacrifice on Jennifer or whatever. But Adam Brody is so good at this type of thing, at being stupid and silly,
Smarmy,
with a little bit of menace, I don't know. Have you seen Ready or Not?
Yes. Oh, that's
he's so good at Ready or Not.
For sure.
And it's a similar type of deal in that. I mean, he is nicer in that movie than he is in this movie, but it's still the same type of thing, right?
We're jumping ahead a little bit, but the scene where it's a flashback, we get it later in the movie where Jennifer talks about like when she's out in the woods, she's taken out to the waterfall at the Devil's Kettle by this band, and they're like looming over her, and she's tied up, and they're going to sacrifice her. And that scene is so good. It's really disturbing. As silly as this movie is, the fact that this, relatively innocent character is just tied down, and we know it's going to happen, and there's no way she's getting out of it. We know what because it's a foregone conclusion. It's flashback. It's incredibly disturbing, but also kind of off kilter and silly. They start singing 8675309 to her, and like that's a vibe that like I think that's so hard to pull off. Like the fact that I am like really, really feeling for the Jennifer character in this moment, and I hate these guys so much, but also they're kind of fun and charming also, and like I feel very squicky about that. And it's like that's like a 1 in 100. How many directors and writers and actors are going to pull off a scene like that and make it work and not make it just some exploitative or silly or stupid? Like, I mean, I think it's really, really good. I think it speaks to everybody involved in this. Like, that scene really got to me. It's maybe one of the best scenes in the movie.
I wrote that down. It is at the same time incredibly silly and stupid and also disquieting and uncomfortable and creepy. And you feel she does not skimp on you feeling the violence of
not
it. Right?
At all. Yeah.
And
it's
this
very
is part of the
Last House
idea
on the Left. Like it's legitimately disturbing, but it's like the perfect halfway point between like Last House on the Left and High Fidelity or something. Like, how do you do that?
But I think, and again, I think it's one of these things which I think is underappreciated sort of genius about this movie, which is that's what she's kind of like saying, right? Is like these guys exist everywhere.
Yep.
Real guys, like they're not devil worshippers. These guys who seem harmless and kind of lame, but like kind of cool or whatever. And they
prey on young girls, right?
Yes, because there's a big part of this where she doesn't even like neither Needy or Jennifer, right? Even though Jennifer's part demon, she could still go and be like, these guys attacked me. These guys are getting famous right now, who are profiting off all of this shit. Like,
love that subplot too. The song, like the way that's used in the movie. Fantastic.
Yeah. And I love it's the only song that you hear from them. Yeah. I love it's the only
Through
from
the
Through the Trees song.
Yeah.
Through the Trees, yeah. It's the only song you hear from them. And
the vibe is perfect.
It's a perfect, it's perfect send-up song. And, there's that moment I think it implies it when they're in class, right? And Needy is like, they didn't save anybody. And that one girl gets like so angry about
with
it,
the
right?
low shoulder t-shirt on. Yeah.
Low shoulder t-shirt. They're called low shoulder, which is another thing that we should say. And the band, and she gets so angry about it. And I think I think even before it was so prevalent because of how quick the cycles happen now with social media, the sort of tragedy like loop that happens so often, right? Where, nobody actually cares about the people who were there, who experienced it, who saw it. All that matters is how the people who weren't there feel about it and react to it, and the people who take advantage of it. Right?
How it's portrayed in the media.
How it's portrayed in the media, exactly. And it's people want to believe that these famous people are great people who run into a fire and save someone. And it gives them permission to like their songs and to whatever, and it gives them to hold on to. I think it's really well put here, as well as, and I thought this song was so fucking funny when they do that montage after the fire. So the band plays at the bar, and they sort of entrance Jennifer and also like start this fire, right? And
accidentally,
causes all,
which is
sort of. I don't know if they really started accidentally. I feel like it's part of like their ritual or some shit.
Really? Because they had like the way it's shown, it's just like a carelessly flicked cigarette or something like that lights the flag on fire, which is kind of nice little image.
No, but the way they react to it is so like they're so calm, like they don't really like stop playing. They see it way before anybody else sees it, right? And they don't do anything.
Like so I gotta tell you, I mentioned the aftermath of that scene later. Like that whole like 3 or 4 minutes there, I think that's my least favorite part of the movie, just because I don't really know what they're going for.
Well, I mean, do you want to give me my take on it? Because I do have a response to it, because I wanted to wait till we were talking about it. So, I think obviously classic situation, right? Younger girls go to a bar. There's a older guy who she's infatuated with. He's a dumbass. He's stupid. He talks shit about her. But for some reason, she's still kind of enamored because he plays a guitar and he can sing, right? And, this crazy thing. And I think it's obviously everything happens in the movie that's big and full. There's death and there's whatever. Is all this sort of metaphor for, all this kind of real stuff can happen, and still people are like laser focused on this stupid shit they want to do, right? Which is she decides she wanted to fuck this guy and she's gonna do it, right? That's like what she's gonna do. And I think partially, and then the song is like sort of like, in the movie lore is I think it's sort of entrancing her. I think that's what the deal is supposed to be, and that's what kind of, and then the fire is part of that. And then that moment I think you were kind of upset about, where like he's just kind of like, yeah, come here, take this, let's go in the van. I think that's really her saying like it doesn't take much. Like these people are fucking mediocre and lame. They're not special. They got nothing going on. And from the outside, because you're seeing the scene from the outside, right? You're seeing from like Needy's perspective, right? Where you're like, why are you doing this? What the hell are you doing? And I think you're supposed to feel like it's stupid and shortcut and lame, right? I think that is what you're supposed to feel in that moment, because you're like, I don't understand why you're going with this guy. Like, and I think we've all been there in our lives. We've had friends.
I mean, I see it. I guess I just, like I think there's a better, maybe subtler way to show that she's just making a bad decision, that she is entranced and things. I get what you're saying though.
Yeah.
This whole, you know, the nightclub fire thing, because that happened, right? Like, you know, the Great White thing that happened in Rhode Island, and you know, the Pantera, you know, or Dimebag Darrell, the guy got up on stage and shot him, like, you know, kind of just like reminded me of those real life incidents in a way that I just didn't think was very funny, and was a little bit like, I'm all for tasteless. Like earlier in that scene, the 9/11 shots, the red, white, and blue 9/11, the two tower shots. I laughed at that, but like the rest of it, I was like, no, it's too soon, a little too close to reality. I didn't love it.
See, this is one of the things too where I think that this is again personal perspective, because I don't know either of those two stories you're talking about, so none of this played to me as referencing anything real.
Look them up; they're horrifying. Trust me.
I'm sure they're horrifying.
But that's what it made me think of. And I'm sure that Diablo Cody knew about those two things also. And I don't know. There are times when I feel like movies like this that are crass and satirical and vulgar, sometimes they touch on real life things that I just don't enjoy the way they approach them.
I like that you're like 9/11's fine.
Yeah.
But this fire that happened
not
to
the
a
Great
band.
White nightclub fire. A lot of people died in that. Not as many as...
A lot of people died in 9/11 too.
I know.
I think you should be careful of the comparison you're making right now.
I'm probably on a watch list already. It's fine.
Yeah. But I think like the tragedy is manufactured by them. It absolutely is, because it's part of their whole deal, right? The part of the whole deal
it is what makes them like stratospherically huge in the movie, which is it's a fun idea. And like I said, I love the way like they get on the back of this song. They're like, "Oh, we're going to donate 3% of the profits of this hit single that we have to the victims of this nightclub fire." Like that was fun.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like the way that she gets reacted to in class when she brings up like, this is fucking crass. Like what, you know, and she explains what crass means or whatever. I remember when Passion of the Christ came out in the movie theater, right? And it was like, you know, obviously doing huge business. And I went to see it because I was like, I'm going to go see it because I go see big movies and I want to.
I did the same thing.
I was like, this is not a very good movie. You know, like it's just like not a well constructed movie. And we talked about it in class, one of my classes. And I said this, and this guy started going off on me, like yelling at me. And he's like, you know, that's what. This is Jesus' story, and I was like, man, I'm just talking about it as a movie, man. Yeah. Like, I just wanted to, you know, like, I didn't want to talk about it as a movie. And that's kind of what it feels like. Like, it's like these moments in culture where you're not allowed to have like a dissenting opinion about things. And especially with her, who he was there, right? She had firsthand knowledge, and nobody cares that she has firsthand knowledge of it, right? And I think that's just so fascinating, a picture of what happens in those situations.
My favorite Passion of the Christ. I was looking at. I remember at the time when it came out, I was looking at Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, and I forgot who the critic was, but someone called it the Jesus Chainsaw Massacre. And like, anytime someone was like, "What'd you think of it?" It's like, well, this one critic called it the Jesus Chainsaw Massacre, and I thought that was really funny. It was totally like, I thought he nailed what that movie was all about.
That's really funny. So throughout the movie, right, she's kind of luring guys into like, you know, what they perceive to be sexual situations and killing them, right? And that recharges her batteries.
Eventually they use the word, but you know, she's the classical succubus sort of demon character.
She like recharges her, and then after like a little while, she has to eat again, right? And one of the people she does it to like this like football player or whatever. That's the first guy. And then I wanted to bring this forward, which I think is such a fucking hilarious moment in line. The fire happens. She kills like the guy like basically the next day basically. And that's when J.K. Simmons finds him with the deer eating his guts or whatever. And then there's like this like montage that happens where they're like, you know, everything was terrible and we didn't think it would ever get better. And then slowly everyone started healing and we started seeing there was hope in the world again. And then this is montage with Amanda Seyfried's voiceover. And then we kind of cut to J.K. Simmons' class again. And he goes, today's the 1 month anniversary of the fire. And I was like, I cackled out loud. I was like, that's so fucking funny that it's been a month. And like this whole, it also said it's not even just a commentary on like society. It's on just being that young, right? Where like that amount of time is a long time, right? And you feel a lot more in that month than you feel like when you're 40. About a month. A month is like
time passes very slowly.
It's been a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. So I thought that was really funny. It really got me that kind of line. And there's one of those lines I think is just a benchmark for what this movie is. You know what this movie is putting out on Front Street as what its whole vibe is that sort of joke. I love a couple of things before we get near the ending, what we get more into the meat of it. Sorry. So, Needy starts to suspect Jennifer, right? They have this. There's a sex scene between her and her boyfriend Chip. At the same time, Jennifer is accosting. I can't remember the character's name, but it's played by Kyle Gallner, who is
Colin. I think it's Colin.
Colin,
yeah, the emo kid.
Yeah, who is much like Adam Brody, playing the character that Kyle Gallner played in every movie in this era.
He's very good in this.
He's very good. He's always very good. Yeah. He's just, this is who he plays. Mm-hmm. He plays like this sort of weird, inverted, who is a little bit emo and a little, it has like usually has a little more of a darker edge than this character has, because the character actually is much more like open. But I love this idea that this character is so fucking horny that he goes into this abandoned
with like plastic tacked up all over the place, like American Psycho style, for sure.
Yeah, I love that, right?
I mean, I've been in high school too.
Exactly.
There, but for the grace of God, when I
yeah. And I love the scene before that where, obviously Jennifer is one of the times Jennifer is really hungry, right? She hasn't eaten anybody in a long time, and it's been a month, so we're getting it every month that she has to kind of do it, right? She has to feed basically, and Kyle Gallner's character asked her out, and she kind of is like, no, basically. Again, another scene where she's very good. Like, she's not like super mean, but she's mean enough. Yeah. Right. And it works really well.
He reacts to that too.
Yeah.
He's like, well, whatever. All right. Like, what's the thing that he asked her about, and she like has no idea what he's talking about, and he's like, all right, maybe I should look for a girl that's more intellectually on my level. It's something. About
a movie. It's Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's what I don't like boxing movies.
Yeah. Like, I probably would have done this. I don't
he goes
know.
Boxing. He's like, oh, fuck this. All right.
I'd like to think I would have said the same thing, but probably.
Yeah. But when she comes up and asks me if you want to go watch Aquamarine, he says yes. So he doesn't have that many scruples.
That's a fun reference too, because
it's a great reference.
I remember that movie coming out at this time, and that would have been like fairly recent at the time.
It's a live action mermaid movie. Yep. People don't know what it is.
About 2006 or so. So not long before this. And I was like, are they talking about that movie? Yeah, I guess they were.
Oh yeah. But the reason why Jennifer decides to go out with him is because Needy expresses a little bit of interest in him, right? That he is kind of cool. Yeah. And that changes her opinion on him. And that's part of one of the underlying things about the movie. I just didn't want to let that kind of thread drop, because that really comes to head later on in the movie.
Well, eventually she sets her sights on Chip.
Yes, absolutely. But we'll talk about the scene. First of all, when we get to the scene in the pool, I want to talk a lot about that scene because I think it's great and I want to get into it. But we have this double scene, right, where Needy is, kind of consummating her relationship with the boyfriend, and Jennifer is killing Kyle Gallner. And in those moments, we've established before that Seyfried and her have some sort of psychic connection. Yeah. Or more, Seyfried and can kind of have psychic connection with her. I don't think it goes both ways and it really too much, but she can kind of tell when she's there, even when she doesn't know, all this kind of stuff. And so she's having sex with Chip, and she starts seeing all these things that are happening. And she's just having a panic attack. And I think it's so funny that Chip is like, yeah, I'm doing it so good, or whatever. Yeah. His girlfriend's really having a panic attack, saying hopeless. And he doesn't get it at all. And I think, again, it's just one of those things where it's not subtle at all, which is one of the things where I just feel like I can't believe people didn't get this stuff when it came out.
Sure. There's a great visual in this scene too, and we don't see much like this, but just sort of an artsy. She's having visions of Jennifer, and there's this one where it's Colin sitting in a chair while she's in bed with Chip, and she sees Kyle in the chair, and Jennifer is naked, perched above him like a gargoyle kind of thing, like a very sort of quintessential demonic horror movie, Exorcist style. It's just a flash. It's probably not even a second long of a shot, and it's just a great visual, and we don't it's not the most visually inventive movie, but it looks fantastic. I mean, it's the visuals are, it's this more sort of a conventional thing, but every once in a while it just kind of gives you something like that. Oh, okay. It also could have been that. It could have been, the tiniest bit artsier, I guess. And I would have been down for that.
Yeah, but I like that it's really evocative of, like you said, this, the Lost Boys sort of 80s horror stuff is really what it's trying to evoke in its visuals. Like, it's not, again, even if it's not trying to be subtle, right?
Yeah.
What you're talking about. But again, just the commentary of that, like his girlfriend's having a panic attack, basically they're having sex, and he just is like, he gets look like, yeah, I'm doing it great. Like that little look he gets on his face, you know?
Oh, and then he's like, when he finally realizes she's upset, he's like, am I too big?
Yeah.
That's always what it is, right? That could be the only problem. It's the only thing you're doing wrong.
And the whole time I'm watching this, like I said, the guy who plays Chip played young Neil, right? In Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which I think came out the same
it's right around the same time
year, right? Or right around the same time. And he has one of the greatest line deliveries in all of movies in Scott Pilgrim. When he does the thing, he punched the highlights out of her hair when he like screams it at Scott after pounding him off, punches knives in the face. It's a very particular mid to late 2000s screen presence.
Yeah,
the guy who plays Chip
for sure.
Like, you know,
which I kind of
would not be on screen
I miss
anymore.
a lot of things about that era, and that is definitely one of them. Yep.
You miss being the age you were that era, Nick. That's why you miss all this stuff.
No, like culture was pretty fun at that time.
I think Jennifer's body is telling you it wasn't so fun. I think that's the point of Jennifer's body. But anyway, so after this, she sees Jennifer sort of on her way home, like in the street. And then that's when we get what you said, Jennifer's in her bed and they make out. And this is when this big kiss scene happens, which I guess both actors were kind of freaking out about before, because they were kind of worried about, you know, it being used to promote things and used as a salacious
And of course
thing.
they did.
Of course, it was one of the prime things in the trailer was this moment, right? And
it's interesting, right? Because you can tell, you know, like Cody said that she had written that in a later draft of the script, right? Like eventually, you know, she wrote it a couple of times and then said, all right, I'm going to crank the sexual tension between the two. And there is, I mean, there's this latent sort of attraction from both sides of that, and this is where it really comes to a head. And I think the script handles it well. I think the actors handle it well. I think Kusama handles it well. And it's just like the only people who really kind of did them dirty here was the people who promoted this or kind of talked about this as like the key scene, because it's actually not. There's, you know, it's important, but it's not like that important. I would say there are other things going on with both of those characters and their relationship. That's because, like, you know, Needy pulls away pretty quickly. It's not like, you know, there is this moment where she is seduced because Jennifer, she is a succubus, so that's kind of what she does. And this is the one time she does it to another female. But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, right, it's not like she goes along with it all the way and then the next day is like, oh, I fucked up. It's like, you know, after a couple of seconds, she's like, wait a minute, what the hell am I doing here? Which is, you know, I think makes sense. Like, it's not as important a scene as, I mean, I feel like that was written about, like, if you look on the Wikipedia page about this movie, the production of this movie, that's about like 75% of that section is just about this one scene that's like not that critical of a scene.
No, I mean, honestly, the scene that comes after, right, is super critical, right? It's the scene where she kind of tells her, you know, about what happened to her.
Yeah.
And we should mention too,
that scene is so good. Like,
it is, it's great.
That sticks in my mind much, much more than this one sort of sex scene between the two of them.
Yeah. And I think that, like, we should mention too, the whole deal with the Devil's Kettle is that it's like this whirlpool under the waterfall that the voiceover beginning is like, hey, they go to another dimension, or, you know, maybe it's just really deep. Like, that's kind of what it is. And that's sort of like the sort of like MacGuffin setup. They throw the knife into that waterfall, into that whirlpool, right, with her blood on it. And it's supposed to be like, that's kind of like what brings this demon sort of like, you know, married to her or whatever. And then, but what I think, another thing I think is so smart about what's written in this movie is that Jennifer has not been replaced by a demon, right? She's still Jennifer. And I think it's key to the metaphor of this movie for that to be the case, which is that, you know, some of it is just the basic, like, violence, you know, begets violence sort of narrative. But, you know, I think it's really about, in many ways, you know, reason why it's called Jennifer's Body, right, is that, you know, it's really about her body. You know, it's used and taken advantage of. It's only spoken about by the men, right, in the movie. And sometimes the women in the movie about, you know, its worth is based on how much or how little sex the body has had, right? That's really the driving force between the whole, like, thing about the movie, right? Is she a virgin or is she not a virgin? You know, and she survives this terrible thing that happens to her, right? But she's, you know, forever altered, right? She's changed, and, you know, she's forced to kind of live this life She doesn't want to be living. And because she's been hurt, she is, you know, she hurts other people.
Yeah,
right? Because
she's hell
been
bent
hurt.
on sort of taking her. I mean, you know, part of it I think is vengeance. Part of it's also like there's some interesting like flashbacks to the two of them as like very young girls, like pre-adolescent, where you can kind of tell that Jennifer, you know, she has this like power thing, like she kind of wants to control Needy a little bit, and so I think that, you know, writ large, and now that she has this sort of it's kind of like a superpower, right? Like it is. This feels in some ways like that comic book thing where you get this sort of superhuman ability that you do. You know, there are consequences to it, like she does have to feed like a vampire or something like that, but also like now she holds all the power, right? And starts it like at first it's like, well, I just need to feed, and eventually it's like, no, I'm going to feed and I'm going to manipulate people too, right? Like there's a psychological side to it too, which I think is really interesting, that I think was there all along, and this just kind of like gives her a pass there, or this gives her the ability to really express that.
See, I would say I partially agree with you, but I would say like stripping out all of the supernatural stuff the plot points that happen in the movie, right? I think it's very much about a person who has been hurt and needs to feel like they have power.
Well, there's a line I think that really speaks to that, right? Like Needy says to her at some point, like about her social status or something like social relevance.
Yes.
Like you haven't
that's
been
in the
relevant.
last fight. Don't do that yet, because that's the last fight. I really want to get into that.
Sorry, but it absolutely.
I want to
speaks
finish
to what
my
you're saying.
metaphor.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to finish my metaphor really quick, which is that, you know, she needs to lash out. She needs to feel powerful because she felt so helpless about this thing that happened to her. So she goes out and she exerts power over these men and hurts to hurt them. Take out the fact she kills them, right? Just think about it, you know, if it was not as supernatural, right? She sleeps with them and she's terrible to them, and she leaves them
humiliates them,
humiliates them and leaves them, right? And to eventually where that's not good enough anymore, and she needs to sort of lash out and hurt the people who are closest to her, right? And because like the one thing that's kind of still tethering her to who she used to be is her best friend, and she can't deal with the fact that, you know, she's hurt by the fact that she used to be this person, right? So she tries to kind of alienate herself from the best friend. She tries to sleep with her boyfriend, kill her boyfriend, but, you know, sleep with her boyfriend, and, you know, and eventually at the end of the movie, it's the breaking of that bond that ends her, right? That ends up eventually killing her, right? And releasing her from this sort of pain that she's in. It is that, right? And so I think it's a really kind of fascinating metaphor and allegory through the whole thing. Allegory is the wrong word, metaphor for the whole thing. But rewinding, right? So we're headed towards the big dance, right? And the whole thing is like,
as always,
Needy. And what I love is they do the sort of like the investigation thing, and I love that moment. She's like, I read all the occult section of our library. And Chip is like,
this is great.
Our library has an occult section. She goes, yes, it's very
small. Yep.
I think it's great. And just coming on like these scenes I love, right? Which people in the library fucking reading books, you know, or whatever, and never think about the ridiculousness of why would the library have these books, you know? And I think that's great. That's called out here. She basically is like, oh, she's going to go to this dance, and it'll be like a feeding frenzy, right? It's going to be like, there's going to be all these people there, and she can just like feed and feed and feed and feed and feed, and all these people are going to die.
I love
Not
it.
really.
Never happens, right? This movie sets up this Carrie ending that it like very, very distinctly doesn't do, and I love that. Like the fact that she leaves the dance, Jennifer leaves the dance, goes after Chip, follows him into this like, you know, like this gothic like old pool setting, like
what
up on a hill. What a set. Yeah, what a visual. It's very, you know, James Whale, and like you know, it just shows how much smarter this movie is than like your average teen horror. Like, not that Carrie isn't a great movie, but like Carrie's already done that, and how many other movies, how many other high school movies, whether they're horror or not, right? Like the big climax happens with everybody there, and then the big dancing. Maybe it's just a budgetary thing. For $16 million, you can't really have you know, the carnage at the dance that you get in a Carrie kind of movie. But I like this so much better because this is such a personal story in a way that,
well, that's it, right? I mean, that's
like,
the thing,
we need
is
to
like
get the two of them back together. Like, I love the final confrontation of this. You're right.
Yeah. What Needy even doesn't understand, right, at a certain point, is like, this isn't about a body count, right? Even she's sort of falling into the trap of like, this is just about how many guys Jennifer can go through, right? And that's not what it's about, right? It's very targeted. It's a very targeted situation and who she's going after. And she goes after Chip for a very targeted reason, not because he's just there, right? She could have got a million other guys, right? And obviously that's in the last, confrontation, right, where she says that to her, and I think it's because she has this bond to Needy, and part of the whole thing for her is this connection and this sort of competition and this fear and this power, and the killing Needy's boyfriend gives her more power than she thinks than anybody else, because then she has power over the one person who knows, who still wants her to be the person she used to be, right? And she wants that to be gone from her, or from her life. I absolutely fucking love that not the last fight, because there's a fight, but this conversation in the pool is an argument.
Yeah.
It is an argument between the two of them. It is why are we still friends? We can't just be friends because we were friends since we were kids, since we were little babies. We're people now. You're toxic, all this stuff. And I love how she picks her apart, and I think Seyfried is great in this scene with Fox. I think Fox is also great in this scene, but I think this is also Seyfried's, one of her strongest scenes is this whole sequence between the three of them. I really, really like that a lot. Yeah,
I actually really like Chip dies in this scene, which is it's a choice, right? That's not something you generally see. I like those last couple moments between him and Needy that I think are very sweet and sort of in a way that this movie isn't always, but it's nice to know that when it wants to go for that kind of stuff, it can actually found that very heartfelt, unexpectedly, because most of this movie is pretty irreverent. And in that moment, you do I actually really like Chip in that moment. I wasn't so crazy about him before when he was was I too big or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's good. It's this good thing of he's not perfect, right? He's not perfect.
Yeah.
But he's a good person.
He's not
he's a good person.
Of her.
He's not taking advantage of her. He actually genuinely loves her. The mistakes he's making with Jennifer before that are just because he's hurt, because Needy basically breaks up with him, says we can't be together. And, I think it's also about her realizing, obviously too late in this instance, that he's enough. He doesn't have to be there's something about, shouldn't have been this thing that she kind of cordoned off in one part of her life and didn't let him be a bigger part of her life.
Yeah,
right?
He's a drummer. He's not a lead singer, and that's okay.
Yeah, which I love. That was a great scene too. We didn't talk about that. Was a great scene. Because also what I like about it is he's cool about it.
Yep.
He's kind of he's not offended. He didn't storm out. He's just nah, thanks a lot. He gets the vibe. He's going with it, and I like that. But yeah, I mean, him dying at the end too is this movie's kind of nasty. It's got a nasty streak to it. And I think that was one of the things I appreciated about it.
Well, it's a very 16-year-old thing, right? You can get away with stuff like that. You write stuff as a teenager and you're okay with killing off characters that you probably wouldn't do later on when you're trying to go for the mass audience or whatever. And I like that. It's really sort of hard on sleeve, emo 16-year-old stuff. And it works, I think, really well.
Yeah. And then the final fight is in Jennifer's bedroom. And I think it wraps back around to what I talked about at the beginning, which is, I think it underscores what's so great about the movie and the little tiny shortcomings of the movie, which is, I think the concept of that fight is good. I think the meat of the reason and the stuff they're saying is good. There are just way too many in that scene. I think it's the most egregious scene, most egregious, Diablo Cody, one-liner. They're just throwing out one-liners.
Yeah, as they're floating, levitating above the bed.
Yeah, exactly. There's just too many. It just gets. We've all come to a head, right? And I am bought in to the metaphorical stakes of your movie at that point. I don't need you to deflate the tension with those kind of lines, because that's when it can feel a little bit of it almost feels like the opposite of self-confidence, right? It feels like self-consciousness in the script, where she's I don't know if people are going to buy this ending, so I'm going to throw my jokes in there so at least people will be oh, it was funny, and I think that's the same problem people have with the weed and stuff. It's the same thing, right? It's the thing of it's can you believe this guy's doing this?
Yeah.
It has that vibe to it at times.
If you think about it, right, her other movie before this is Juno, and Juno goes completely in the opposite direction, right? The ending of Juno is so earnest and so sweet and so heartfelt, and it's just so nicely done and subtle in ways that the rest of the movie kind of isn't. And this one, it is. I agree with that completely, right? It's a little bit of Diablo Cody being like, grabbing you by the lapel, like, remember, this is a Diablo Cody movie, and it's not necessary. And I think it like emotionally would be a lot more satisfying if we didn't do that here. I don't, even the sort of like hackneyed visual device of the BFF necklace, and she tears that. Like, how does that kill Jennifer exactly?
Well, I think that's the.
Well, it doesn't kill her. It weakens her, and then she like stabs her to death, and her mom comes in. That's a fun moment.
Yeah, I think that's what I was saying before. The bond with Needy is really the last thing, like kind of like keeping her strong, right? Even when she's the weakest, and she's at her weakest, she's still sort of like feeding off that energy, Needy's energy,
and to rip that off. Yeah, I think it's
like
a little
symbolic
obvious.
moment.
Sure. Yeah,
there's a lot in this movie that's very obvious. I think that is, but I think that's the point of that moment, right? And then her driving the knife into her and the box cutter, right?
What is
like
this? You know what this thing does? It cuts boxes. And
boxes. I was like, okay, Diablo. Yeah. I was like, I just hear her. I can see her in a computer like writing that line.
Yeah, just cackling to herself a little bit.
Yeah. So and then we wrap back around to the asylum stuff or whatever, which of course, the typical early or typical 2000s sensitive portrayal of mental illness in movies. That's the first thing I thought when the movie started. I was like, man, we really have come a long way at this point from stuff like this. We don't do this shit anymore where it's like mental illness. She's got like dolls and shit, and she's whatever, and she's not even actually crazy. It's like and they're still playing all those little tropes off of it. And we think where she got bit by Jennifer during their fight, so a little bit of the demon went to her, and because she did have sex beforehand, same transference goes over to her, but she's not as fully like I think taken over, right? She doesn't like have to kill. She just kind of has like a little bit of the powers or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I think is a fine metaphor for like violence doesn't stop with when the victim is gone. The original victim is gone.
A little bit of Jennifer in her, like she can't completely let that part of her life go.
Yeah, and all this that happened with Jennifer radiates, and it affects her life too, right? These kind of like the violence is like just keeps rippling out, just like anything else, it keeps affecting more people. I do like that she's going to kill Low Shoulder.
Yeah,
I think it's great.
I gotta catch a band. I'm gonna follow a band on the road or whatever. Really fun Lance Henriksen cameo at the end.
Yeah, I was like, Lance.
He looks great in this. I mean, he's way wrinklier now than he was in 2009. He looks pretty. He looks like Bishop in this movie.
My last note is Lance Henriksen. That's my last note on my list.
I didn't remember that at all. And I was like, is it him? I was like, yeah, that's totally him. He's, I also like, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that character is supposed to be lecherous and is going to take advantage of her. But like, also we liked Lance Henriksen so much. And like toward the end there, it's almost like, well, maybe not. Maybe he's not such a bad guy, although he's pretty creepy.
Yeah, he's a little creepy. But also, we know Lance Henriksen is also a little bit creepy in movies. So I think that also comes across. Even when he's nice, he's creepy. Yeah. So I think that's just his vibe. There were several times, like all throughout this movie, I was like, this guy. when Chris Pratt showed up, I was like, what the fuck is Chris
we never
Pratt
see that character again. Yeah.
No, because I think he dies in that fire, I think. That's why. Yeah. And he's giving... See, this is the thing. And so I'll say, we've never talked about Chris Pratt, obviously. We haven't done any movies with Chris Pratt in it, really, on the show, obviously. Pratt... Obviously, this is even before Parks and Rec, right? This is before he is like, he's still like, this is still like Gilmore Girls, like post Gilmore Girls era or whatever. And I think he is giving the correct version of his energy in this movie. Yeah, because he's just like dumb
proto
shit.
Chris Pratt. Yeah, it's it's nascent, like what Chris Pratt would be. I kind of enjoyed that moment that he's in, but it's just one scene and he's pretty inconsequential. He's another of Jennifer's conquests that thinks he was conquering her.
Yeah, this is one of those moments where, again, Press is a fascinating guy because obviously after Guardians of the Galaxy, he decided, no, I'm going to be like serious, cool movie star. Yeah. And I think even though he goes, all these movies make so much money, I don't think he's good in any of them. And I think he is like, other than when he returns to playing Star-Lord, I think he's still good in that role. But I just think like, whenever I see Chris Pratt try to be cool in a movie and it's supposed to be taken earnestly, this is how I feel like he seems.
He comes off a little douchey.
Yes, he always comes off douchey. Yep. Comes off like I'm so high on my own shit that like I'm so cool, but really I'm nothing. And like that's how I always feel about him in any movie where he's not playing that. when he's trying to play cool. Like that's what Star-Lord is, right? That's what Star-Lord is. Like I think I'm really cool, but I'm shit.
Yeah.
Right. But then like in Jurassic World, he's like, no, I'm just really cool. And I'm like, no, man, this does not work for me. You know? But anyway, so like it's so interesting he showed up. But I was like Adam Brody. I don't remember any. I remembered Amanda Seyfried was in this movie. I remembered that Megan Fox was in this movie. That's only people I really remember in
Amy
this movie.
Sedaris plays Needy's mom.
Needy's mom. Did not remember that.
Nope, I didn't
at all.
Remember J.K. Simmons, and I love that guy.
No,
pre-Whiplash, but post-Juno.
Post-Juno. I mean, that's why he's in this movie,
sure,
right? Because of Juno. Yeah, he's. Yeah, I mean, I was just like, oh, there's all of these character actors that I love that are just popping up in this movie that are used really well in the right roles, in the right, everyone is bringing the right energy. And I think the reason this movie really works is that I think everybody in this movie knows exactly what kind of movie they're in and is playing it the correct way. And we talked about this last time with Aeon Flux, how there are a couple people in that movie who just either don't know what kind of movie they're in or don't want to be the kind of movie they're in and are playing it either like it's below them or playing like they're in a different movie, right? And this movie, all the tone, everything is unified, and that has to do with script. I'm sure a lot of that was because Juno just come out and people were like, I want to be in the next fucking Diablo Cody movie. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to be there. But I think, all this is a soup that is put together by Kusama as the chef, right? She is directing the performances. She's managing that set. She's composing really, really good-looking shots. Like I said, it's a good-looking movie.
Yeah,
I think when
she is. You're right. She's like the shepherd or the steward of this movie. Like this is a Diablo Cody movie, much more than it's a Karyn Kusama movie. But everything that is left to Karyn Kusama, she does incredibly well. Right? The pacing is very good. I think the directing of the actors, as you're saying, is very, very good. The visuals are really, really nice. I forgot how good-looking a movie this was, and the director is so responsible for that tone, and I think the tone of this is like people didn't get it, and I think maybe still don't in some sense. Like I really do think this one is ripe for that critical reevaluation, and people need to see it again. You need to go into it thinking, this is 2009's Heathers. It's not the generic sort of horror thing, because there was so much of that at the time too. Like this was the era of like the teenage horror movie, the Lionsgate, like this is going to come out opening weekend, make $40 million or something like that for the high school crowd, and then be gone, and then have like a nice shelf life on DVD or whatever. This is not that. It's so much more fun. It's so much smarter than that. And I really, it sucks that this was not like Karyn Kusama needed this to be a hit, and it wasn't. And again, she's kind of in movie jail, as we were saying last time after Aeon Flux, and it's like she really shouldn't be. She does a really good job here. Like there is nothing that's wrong with this movie that's Karyn Kusama's fault, and it's just like for everyone involved, everyone is working like where they should be. Megan Fox is working where she should be, and I don't know, underappreciated movie. I really feel like it. And I was hoping I would feel that way. I didn't want to go into this remembering that I liked it, remembering that I was rooting for it at the time, and I felt bad that it didn't do well. And I felt like I might see it, now in 2024 and be like, oh no, this actually did suck. Like I was wrong about this. I think it was actually better on my final. It took me a while to get to a second viewing of it, but I'm glad I saw it again. And I look forward, like this is one that I think is going in the rotation for me. I'm not a big rewatcher of movies, but like this is one that like if anybody ever mentions it, be like, you know what, you should see it again. And I think I want to see it again too. Yeah,
I mean it's funny too, right? Because I think we mentioned the Diablo Cody thing at the beginning about how she was already in this backlash. Right. I think, too, there's a world where if this is her first movie, right, and not Juno, right, I think this movie is received also completely differently. Right. Because it's a movie like other movies at that time, like Slither or.
Oh, I love Slither.
But it's that type of movie where it's like, yeah, obviously this is a comedy and people would have picked it up in that sense. Right. And would have been like, this is funny, scathing, satire of horror movies and, and high school culture or whatever. And it'd be like, you got to see this thing. Right. And without the expectations of like, or the baggage of this is a Diablo Cody thing and it's going to have all these lines,
Well, like, how
because
did this movie not hit? Like, this is a movie for the smart, cool kids, right? Like, what Diablo Cody probably was as a teenager. Karyn Kusama says, this is the movie I wanted to see when I was 16. You know,
Yeah.
this daughter of, like, intellectuals who, like, had seen a bunch of films before and was, like, literate in that way. And, you know, probably had a lot of friends. Like, she wasn't a nerd in school, right? But she was also intellectually kind of at a higher level. Like, there's a lot of kids like that. And I feel like this was a movie for them that they completely missed out on, and the ones who went to see it were like, you know, the Friday night shitty PG-13 horror movie crowd, and that's unfortunate.
Well, I also think, right, that I think that the cool kids also didn't give a shit about Diablo Cody at that time, and I also think Megan Fox is also another thing where it's at the time a little bit of a, you know, you're maybe garnering a more wrong attention, more bad attention than good attention.
Fair enough.
Because she is known as just the hot girl who can't act from, you know, from Transformers. And it's like, are you just shoving this actor down our throats because you've decided they're going to be the next big thing? We haven't agreed to this, right? At this time, right? You also remember this is where we are cresting right in the middle now. On horror, though, between we are kind of, the Saw thing is sort of like is dipping, and the Paranormal Activity thing is starting to rise. Sure. Right?
Yeah.
I think we're 3 Paranormal Activity movies in at this point, 2 at this point when this movie comes out.
Yeah, and we're at least 4 or 5 Saws by 2009. I think.
Oh yeah,
5.
for sure.
Yeah, they were once a year.
And so we are not in this zone with horror movies, right? And you said the movie is advertised as a straight up horror movie, right? It's not and this time torture porn and found footage are the things that garner a lot of attention, and not stuff like this, right? We are kind of moving out of this world, or this world is inhabited in a much lower scale. Like, we're talking, like, you know, movies like Hatchet and Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which are like really good movies and funny, you know, but
made for
small,
a cult audience and
tiny
niche audience.
Cult,
yeah, I love both of those movies.
Me too. I love all those movies too. This movie fits right into that like bucket, you know, for me.
Niche for sure.
You know, and you're obviously now, I think, you know, you're 5 years past Shaun of the Dead, which is, you know, again, more outwardly comedic and pitched as a comedy, you know, and obviously highly loved at this point. But you just have a confluence of a lot of things that are just not, the market isn't prepared, right, for this movie to come out, and they don't know how to sell it, and we end up at this point. The production company that had financed it is, the shingle is dead, you know, so it's like, what, you know, then it's put on Fox Searchlight, and I'm sure Fox Searchlight was like, what the fuck are we gonna do with this thing? We're going to put it out in September, you know, like, not a great time for horror movies to come out, you know, and the truth is, if it was demonstrably worse than it is, it probably would have done better, which is the sad thing about it, you know?
That's a great point.
If it was the more boring, straight up horror movie version of this, it would have done better.
Like a shitty version of Carrie.
Yeah. I mean, or like, you look at where they're doing like House of Wax and all those type of
like the Carrie sequel that came out that did pretty well.
Do you mean The Rage, Carrie 2?
The Rage, yeah. I feel like that movie made some money. It was interesting.
That was well before, though.
No, I know, but like, you know, it could have easily been something like that. Diablo Cody later on. So this movie eventually found its audience. It did well. It was #1 DVD sales the week it came out on DVD. This was still a time when people were like purchasing physical media, and you'd see something like this with a cool looking cover, and, you know, maybe I'll buy that movie because they were $10 at Best Buy or whatever. And it did really well. It made like $2 million. $1.8 million, I think, in the first week it came out on DVD. And Diablo Cody's like reaction to that was not like, oh, good, people are finally seeing this movie. It was more like, where the fuck were you when this was out in theaters? And that's interesting. You know, I feel like that's pretty raw and honest. And I like that she said that, right? I like that she, you know, wasn't just like grateful that like, oh, you're seeing this movie now when it's like kind of less important. And you know, after all the stuff that we had to go through when this came out and was a bomb, it was kind of notoriously a failure, and like now it's finding its audience. Oh, whoopee, you know? And it's like, I'm kind of with her on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It opened 5th its opening weekend, September 18th, 2009, and not a good thing.
Not at all. And the movie that beat it out for fourth, something called Love Happens with Jennifer Aniston. Like, what the hell is that? Is that a real movie? Like, that doesn't sound real.
Isn't that with is that one of the no, it's Aaron Eckhart.
Oh, I love that guy.
I'm just looking it up right now. Directed by Brandon Camp. Who the fuck did Brandon Camp? And he made a Benji remake. He made Dragonfly.
With Kevin Costner.
With Kevin Costner. Yeah. Anyway,
another box office smash.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Like I wanted to know. So there's this was Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs came in number 1, which fine, family friendly movie that based on a popular book. That makes sense. There's a Tyler Perry movie, which those usually open pretty strong too. I think that came in number 3. Put it out The Informant with Matt Damon. That was number 2.
Yeah. Oh, wait, let me look. Let me see right now. Let's see here. Yeah, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs opens number 1 at $35 million. I mean, that is a stone cold hit for Sony Pictures, that movie. It ends up making 24 domestic, 111 international, so 236 total. They obviously make a sequel to that movie. Number 2 is The Informant. Yes, that's Soderbergh, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a Steven Soderbergh film with Matt Damon.
If I'm thinking of the right thing, yeah.
Yeah, it opens to $14 million. It ends up only making about $33 million domestically. But it makes a bunch on DVD and Blu-ray. I Can Do Bad All by Myself, which you mentioned, the Tyler Perry movie, that opens at number 3. Opens to $11 million. That's an Medea movie, so it ends up making $51 million, which is still good. Multiplies 4 times off its opening weekend, which is really strong.
Very low production budgets on those two, and he had like a 10-picture deal with like Lionsgate at the time, and he was just rolling in money.
Yeah. Love Happens, like we mentioned, opens at $10 million.
I want to,
crazy.
I want to meet one person who remembers Love Happens.
Yeah, I don't know. It also has that poster that every movie of its kind had at that time. Jennifer's Body, we said, opens at number 5. And then the other movies in the top 10, we've got in its second weekend the animated film 9, not the Rob Marshall adaptation of the musical.
I love that movie. It's guilty pleasure for me.
What, the Rob Marshall movie or this animated?
No, the Rob Marshall movie. I've always wanted to see that animated movie 9. I think it came out the same year too. Weren't they both like
They came out the same year.
Yeah.
Yes, they came out the same year.
Kind of confusing.
I have to strongly disagree with you about that 9 movie, but that's fine.
I own that. It's been a long time since I watched it, though.
I think Rob Marshall has made one good movie his entire filmmaking career. In its third weekend, Inglourious Bastards, it's made 5. Sorry.
Wow, right. That came out in August of that year.
Yeah, sorry, it's in 5 weeks of release at this point. 5 weeks of release. It's made $111 million. That's going to go into nominate a bunch of Oscars. All About Steve is at number 8. Sorority Row, talk about horror, schlocky, stupid horror movies. Yeah. It's going to make less money than Jennifer's Body, so we can at least have that. But another horror movie is at number 10 in its 4th week of release. The Final Destination has made $63 million so far, and will go on to make 66 and 187 worldwide. That is a franchise that I have affection for, even though several of them are quite bad. The Final Destination.
They have their moments.
They do have their moments.
I will not drive behind a log truck on the highway anymore.
Every time, I'm like, Final Destination.
David R. Ellis, rest in peace. That guy was awesome.
Yeah. The second and the third one are quite strong, I would say. Yeah. Of those
I will also never go in a tanning bed thanks to those movies.
No, oh my God.
I occasionally look up at the high shelves at Home Depot. Like, I think I'm going to stay in the middle of the aisle.
Yeah. Whenever I go into a closet that has like a lot of stuff, I'm like, this looks like that Final Destination closet. In Final Destination 2. When they're like, let's put all of the terrible stuff in this one closet.
I wish
that movie's a lot of fun.
If the Final Destination movies had just completely foregone plot, if they had been just completely abstract and just did the Rube Goldberg like killing sequences, I'd have so much more fun with them. Like, everything in between those is just like completely meaningless and pointless and not fun. And those sequences are just pretty much all fun.
Oh, they're great. I mean, that's what's the great thing about the second Final Destination movie is the first one is not good because the first one, it takes itself so fucking seriously.
It's from the X-Files guys. It's kind of going for that tone.
Yeah. Yeah. And the second one is like, no, we know how ridiculous the death scenes were, but they're ridiculous in an awesome way. And if the whole tone of the movie around them fits the tone of those scenes, then that's the winning formula, right? And that they were absolutely right. That movie completely won me over on because I really did not like that first movie, and the second movie I was like, this rules.
Yeah, I thought the first one was okay, but the second one is really where the franchise kind of found its voice, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the third one you put Mary Elizabeth Winstead in the lead. So she always brings like a certain amount of, I think, authenticity and and she's another person who's great at just saying bullshit and it sounds good. And I was just like, look, let's do the great kills.
I really
That's
like
all
her
I
as John McClane's daughter.
No, I don't think anyone's ever said that before.
No, Brian Verderosa, our mutual friend Brian Verderosa has said that before.
So you want to hear some other horror movies that came out in 2009?
Yes, I'm sure I saw every single one of them.
I saw a lot of these. The Friday the 13th remake, the Platinum Dunes. I forgot about the Platinum Dunes era
remake,
of horror movies.
The very brown, saturated Platinum Dunes horror remakes.
Yes. Sometimes looked visually very nice.
Yeah.
Often were kind of hollow. That first Texas Chainsaw remake,
Not
I think,
bad.
is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. Looks really nice.
Misses
Friday
the
13th
point,
remake,
but
misses the point.
Yeah.
They all miss the point.
They all miss the point. The Friday the 13th remake totally misses the point.
He has like a little trap cave that he brings people in. He's shooting bows and arrows at him. I'm like, Jason can't shoot bows and arrows.
Like I mean, maybe I'm misimagining this movie, but I remember Jason like bigger than Kane Hodder. Like he's just like the most jacked diesel dude ever. And I don't know.
I thought they brought back one of the guys to play him in that movie.
Maybe they did, but I feel like they put like a muscle suit on him, like underneath it.
My biggest thing was like he was like shooting bows and arrows at them. I'm like, this is not. They can't do that.
Yeah.
The whole point of these movies, they got to be right up close when they kill him. And then like I think one of the worst ones is that Nightmare on Elm Street one, because that one really missed.
Still haven't
Jackie
seen it. Yeah. And
Jackie Earle Haley.
Jackie Earle Haley.
Great choice for casting it, and they just totally missed the point. Human Centipede comes out in 2009. Finn comes out in 2009. House of the Devil comes out in 2009.
I love House of the Devil.
The Last House on the Left remake, which is a pretty good remake, I would say.
Yeah.
Drag Me to Hell comes out. Speaking of misunderstood horror
comedies playing themselves off as horror movies and
that
disappointing the horror audience. Yeah. Well,
that movie rules.
And that was one that I went into it thinking, oh, this movie's going to be like terrifying, and it's real silly. It's like Evil Dead 2 silly, and like I think if I had gone into it expecting Evil Dead 2 silly, I would have liked it more. And in time, I've come to appreciate it.
I love that movie because I was hoping, I was like, I hope this is like Evil Dead 2.
Yeah,
I was hoping when I went to
more
see
like
it.
Evil Dead 1, and it totally isn't.
Yeah. To be fair, he's like never made a movie like Evil Dead 1 ever again.
No.
But so we got a bunch of like we got some crap too. The Unborn, The Haunting in Connecticut. Speaking of Kyle Gallner,
I live in Connecticut. I have my entire life. I still haven't seen that movie.
Oh really? I saw it in the movie theater.
Really?
It's not good.
I saw the
Fourth
Unborn
Kind
in the movie theater.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Is that the oh god, is that the one with Gary Oldman? Isn't it? And it's like a Jewish.
It's a Dybbuk.
It's based around Judaism,
and
right?
The lead actress in that, who I don't think has been in anything else, is absolutely gorgeous. And the movie knows it, but like literally, there's nothing else notable about it. Gotcha.
The Fourth Kind, which mostly known to the fact that at the beginning it has like Mila Jovovich being like, "This is a true story," and it wasn't a true story at all. They made it up. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Which is not great, but is better. I think better than the first Halloween remake. At least it had some interesting stuff.
I haven't seen it, but yeah, I've seen a couple of clips, the horse and everything, and like,
I feel it's got some cool kills.
Yeah, I feel like this year I need to finally just give in and check that one out.
It's got this one sequence where you see, which I've never seen in the slasher movie before, where the main character comes in to a place where a murder has happened, and then she's like walking through where all the blood is, and then you're seeing like a flashback to how the murder actually happened. It's so good. It's such a good, interesting like way it happens. Our movie Pandorum came out in 2009.
Oh, I love Pandorum.
I love Pandorum. Zombieland came out in 2009, which is very interesting, right? That speaking of, that's just like a straight up comedy, right? And I think that probably comes out August, I think, of that year, which comes out before Jennifer's Body, which probably does not seed the ground very nicely. My Bloody Valentine 3D comes out that year.
It's fun in theater.
Sorority Row, we talked about. I saw that in the theater as well, in 3D. Dead Snow comes out that year. The Ethan Hawke vampire movie with Sam Neill.
The Spierig brothers made that.
Yes, they did. That's absolutely right. That's really Rec 2 comes out that year. I didn't see it in 2009, but good sequel to the Spanish language horror film, which I really like a lot. So yeah, it was an up and down year, but it had some good horror movies in 2009. It's a shame what happened to Jennifer's Body, though.
It is.
Splice came out in 2009.
Splice.
That's Nimrod Atal. Is that a director?
No, that's
Vincenzo Natali.
Yeah, director of Q, which is
that's right,
the cult classic that it should be.
Yes,
love Q.
Absolutely, agreed. Definitely that Q. One of the first movies I worked at a video store. I started working at a video store when I was 15. One day, was just in the video store, and I was like, "What is this?" And I just rented it and watched it. And I was like, does anybody else know about this movie? That this movie exists? What this movie is? Then when you couldn't ask anybody except people that you knew.
Yeah.
Well,
right. And there was a lot of low budget sci-fi horror stuff on the shelf at the time, and that just happened to be an actual good movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely caught us by surprise. So you worked in a video store. I did like about 6 months at Blockbuster when I was in college, but I was a very good college student, and I was a very good like party or fraternity brother guy. I was a very bad employee of any place I worked at. Like I put 100% of myself into everything but my jobs during those 4 years. So
I did get some in high school.
So that was nice.
In high school, I worked at like a mom and pop video store.
Oh, that's cool. That's more fun than the corporate place that I was.
And, the managers would only work during the day and then basically would just leave the store to tend to these, fucking teenagers all night, which is crazy.
Did you write a terrible script about your experiences there? I know you did.
100%.
I'm sure it was fine. I'm sure it was better than most, but.
No, it was terrible, Nick. I don't have any qualifications about it. Just like every young white millennial boy's scripts, They all had something to do with working at a video store. Yeah. Well, I made it into a script that I made as a student film. We all made Clerks. Yep. We all saw Clerks. So the managers there wouldn't work at night, so they would leave it like free range for the kids to run the store, and they gave you certain permissions, like in the computer system, and so you could only check out a certain amount of movies, and you couldn't check out any like super new releases or whatever, and all this other stuff. And one day, because I would come in for my shift at 4 o'clock or whatever, and they'd be leaving. And one day they forgot to sign themselves out of the computer. So I went into my profile and gave myself like completely open permissions to do anything I wanted. So I could check out my own movie, because it was somebody else had to check out your movie for you. You couldn't check out your own movies, all that kind of stuff. I gave myself all open permissions. I could do whatever I want. I could set my movie not due for 90 days or whatever the shit, And so I was just taking like bags of movies home with me at night. And one day I came in and they were like, Bobby, how come you have all these permissions on your profile? Because apparently they were looking through stuff or whatever. And I was like, I don't know. Like, how would I ever have access to that? There's like, you can't prove anything. Nothing you can do. Only you can prove is if you were negligible and left your sign in, and then it was going to be in trouble then, huh? I liked working at a video store, though. That was a fun job. And then I worked for 2 months at a Blockbuster when I was in college, only to make enough money to go on a trip to Las Vegas that we were going on. I needed spending money for the trip to Las Vegas we were going on. I was there for 2 months, never came back. I was there, though, when they eliminated late fees. I came in one morning, and they were like, you have to watch this video from the CEO of Blockbuster. And it was like, we're like, I was like, okay.
A big deal,
and they're like, huh? And, dude, they didn't give anybody any notice. We walked in that morning, and they were like, late fees are done. They're done. So when you check movies in, the system should reflect it. If they reflect it, you can zero them out. This is how it works. And people were like, and so people will come in and check out movies. I'm like, when does it due? Because they always ask you, when does it due back? And I'm like, it's not. I don't know. It's not.
Keep it.
Keep it. Like, until I remember someone came in. This kind of broke me at working at a video store, though. And they were like, I'm really looking for a really good movie. And I was giving, and they're like, I'm thinking about renting The Day After Tomorrow. And I was like, that movie's terrible. I was like, it's really boring. I was like, I would really not recommend getting it. I was like, I recommend these other 3 sort of like big disaster-ish epic action movies that are kind of new. They walked around for like 10 minutes. They came back with The Day After Tomorrow and checked out The Day After Tomorrow. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, I guess that was the other thing too. Because like I wanted to be that guy. It was like, here's my amazing recommendations, and nobody was listening to them, but whatever.
Yeah.
I got to see Wet Hot American Summer before anybody else I knew. So that was cool.
Yeah. Those were cool things. Like they would like, The new release would come in like for that Tuesday or whatever, and they'd come in on like a Friday, and that weekend you could take them home and watch them because they kind of wanted you to watch them, so you would know what you're doing.
Recommend them to people.
And I remember Napoleon Dynamite coming out, and it had been like this indie darling. I was all tuned into like Ain't It Cool News and all these things at the time, so I was like, I'm ready for this movie. It's gonna be hilarious. It's gonna be the funniest movie I've ever seen in my life. And I watched it, and I was like 40 minutes into it, and I was like, this shit's terrible. I was like, what are people talking about? At the end with the dance and all this stuff happened, and I remember talking to my buddies who had seen the movie already. I was like, you like this movie? Like, yes, you think the dance was funny? I was like, by the time the dance happened, I wanted to run out a window.
Yeah, I was in the minority about that one too. I thought it was a little overrated. I also like that came out like really, really close to Garden State, and I don't know why. I always kind of associated those two movies like together, and I really liked Garden State, and I saw that first, and I was like, okay, this is going to be another one of those like sensitive indie comedy dramas about quirky characters, and I guess that's what it is, but definitely not in the sort
I don't know if it's sensitive. I think sensitive might be the but I haven't seen it since I think I watched it the first time, and I was so turned off by it, I never watched it again.
I've seen it since then. I mean, it doesn't get a lot better, but like, I think if you see it with people who really like it, I think I was
definitely
convinced to enjoy it a little bit more than I did the first time. But I remember the first time there's one laugh in the middle. I liked when he chucked the superhero out the window on the string. I thought that was really funny, and I was like, okay, if we can have 90 minutes of that kind of stuff, I'm down. But it's really not that.
It just felt like it was one of the things I talk about this all a lot and make this reference a lot when I'm talking about certain movies, especially back then, was that it really felt like you walked into a conversation with a bunch of friends who were all had like really hilarious inside jokes they were sharing with each other, and they're all laughing. And you're just like, I don't know what's going on. I don't get it. Why? What's so funny about this? And at that time, I was like, whatever, I was 23, 22, whenever that movie came out. I don't remember, 21, something like that. It was 21. I think I was 21 when that movie came out. I was such a little shit about movies I didn't like. You know what I mean? I was just like, if you like a movie I don't like, I'm going to make you feel bad about it. Like, I'm going to like be like, what is wrong with you as a person that you don't like this movie, I don't miss
my taste is the only taste. We've all been there. I think anybody who does what we do and who thinks like we think, they had that phase, and hopefully you grow out of it. I mean, some people don't, and I feel like we have.
No, they don't. I definitely have.
I
am like, I'm so much more, and the thing is, like, sometimes I should rewatch it because I'm also so much more open now to like weird shit, and I didn't used to be. I used to be open to a very specific kind of weird shit when I was younger, and now I'm much more open to like all kinds of weird shit, that I would normally, what I would have passed discounted. So I feel that's one thing I'm very happy about.
Can I recommend to you then, after you watch Napoleon Dynamite, Jared Hess's, I think it's his third movie. He did Napoleon Dynamite, then he does Nacho Libre in like 2005. If
you tell me to watch Gentlemen Broncos, I'm going to fucking kick you in the face.
Gentlemen Broncos, there's something about, it's not a good movie. It's not funny all the way through, but there's a couple of scenes in that movie that are fucking side splitting, and I will defend it to the death.
There's about 7,000 movies I'm going to watch before I watch Gentlemen Broncos.
I mean, and fair enough. But like, if you get on like a Jared Hess kick, please don't skip over Gentlemen Broncos, because there are some moments in it that and you probably won't find them funny, but it might help you understand me better. I'm thinking about it now, and I'm like, the laughs are bubbling up inside me. I might be the only person who thinks that, but that movie's got a couple of scenes.
There is a certain, and it's funny, we're talking about critical reappraisal, so this kind of fits in with the Jennifer's Body conversation. Oh yeah,
we're talking about Jennifer's Body, aren't we?
Yeah, there's always been a certain kind of humor that I just don't jive with, and I feel like, the whole like Danny McBride-averse of TV is very much sort of like a cousin to the Jared Hessness. I think Jared Hess has something to do with some of the Danny McBride stuff as well.
You're David Gordon Green, but I see where you're coming from with that.
It just has never been a thing that I really found really funny. And so I was, but as stuff like Diablo Cody has always been stuff I found very funny, and I think that it's obviously to each their own. It's like one of those things where I understand why people don't like that language and those type of jokes, but for me, that's like the kind of shit I love. And I will accept a lot of artifice for really clever language. I guess that's one of my weaknesses. And I think part of the reason why the other humor doesn't work for me is because it's about the opposite of that, right? It's more about energy and
it's like a stupidity, like an Adult Swim kind of anti-comedy almost.
Which has also never been a thing that I've really been like.
See, I'm hit and miss with that. So like Tim and Eric and the Eric Andre show and those kinds of things. Like there are times when I think that's hilarious, and there's times when I just I think it's too much and it's dumb rather than just trying to appear dumb kind of thing. But I don't know.
But then I love Tim Robinson. Like I think Tim Robinson is like the funniest person. In the world.
Sloppy Steaks, one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. I love that guy. And Sam Richardson and like that whole crew. They're great.
He's doing a movie with Paul Rudd.
Yep.
I'm in.
Another recommendation. Sorry, I look completely off topic here.
Throw it on me. We're at the end of the show. We talked a lot about Jennifer's Body. I think we talked very well about it.
There's a 2-season show that was on Comedy Central called Detroiters with Tim Robinson and Sam Richardson.
I need to watch it.
Fucking so funny. I'm so sorry that they canceled it. I watched it I think it was canceled by the time I went back and checked it out. And there are some scenes in that show that are just like some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen on TV.
They had a really funny bit together during when they did like the NFL schedule announcement, like the Detroit Lions schedule announcement or whatever. They were good.
I love this.
I love Sam Richardson. Yep. He's great in the After Party.
Very funny in Veep.
Very funny in Veep. A really underrated movie that nobody really watched because why would they? That Werewolves Within.
Oh, I like that movie. Yeah.
Oh, he's fucking hilarious.
The star of that movie.
Yeah, he's so good in that movie. Really clever, like funny movie.
Yep. Pretty
that's oddly
good
based on a
werewolf
game.
Movie.
Yeah, it's also oddly based on a game, which is like so funny to me. Good stuff. Yeah, I think. So next week we are going to be talking about The Invitation, Karyn Kusama's follow-up to Jennifer's Body, which comes out in 2015, 6 years after Jennifer's Body. She does a lot of TV in between. She's directing a lot of TV, but her first film. After that, and it's a tiny budget horror movie. So she's kind of become oddly a horror movie director when she makes movies. Like that's kind of what happens these 6 years apart. If you can find any sort of like combination between them. I saw The Invitation when it came out in 2015 and I loved it. I haven't watched it since.
Yeah, same
so
here.
I'm really excited to watch it again. That movie I remember not being funny at all. So
no,
we're being very serious.
Karyn Kusama is so interesting too because she comes out so strong with Girl Fight, and it's this like sensitive drama. It's a sports movie. Like she's never done anything remotely like that again. Like she's never had,
but she's never written anything ever again.
No, that's the other thing, right? That is her script too. But like, I mean, she's so good at that in 2000. It's like she could probably still do that if you give her something like that. Give her a character-based drama, and let her.
All those movies that they make now, all those character-based dramas they make nowadays.
Yeah. Well, and she's doing television, and that's where you can kind of get more of that stuff. But like,
that's where you can do it.
I don't know. I mean, I again, so many things in this career. Like we talked about Kaczynski and like this triumphant arc that his career has, and then he gets to make the Top Gun sequel that everybody loves, and it's like Karyn Kusama, like she just kind of keeps getting kicked when she's down, and it's like she's a good filmmaker, and
she is. All the movies look good. That's the thing too.
Yeah,
all the movies look good. Obviously there's some stuff in Fox doesn't look great, but when the movie looks good, it looks really nice, and Jennifer's Body looks really nice, and I remember The Invitation looking great.
Yep.
Obviously very small scale. We haven't seen Destroyer yet. No, that'll be a fresh watch for both of us.
Fascinated. I feel like we might end up. That might be a discovery for us, right? We might be recommending that with people.
Hopefully,
or it could suck, or it could be just another misfire. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I like the idea.
And then we'll watch the Yellow. Yeah, and then we'll watch the Yellow Jackets premiere episode, the pilot, which looks great. I mean, that show has such a sharp visual style, and I'm guessing it comes a lot from her whole thing.
I'm pumped to see it. I've been meaning to watch that show before we ever even talked about doing this podcast or doing Karyn Kusama, and like it's been one of those things on my list. So I probably will, if I like it, and I think I'm going to, I'll continue and watch the whole series.
It's a cool show. It's a very cool show. So I'm excited. It's a very different career than Kaczynski, like you were talking about. It's hard. You can't really map it, right? Because there's such these long breaks, and it feels like the shots she gets are her sort of forcing her way back in, and then they don't hit, with the way that they want them to, and then she has to force her way back in again. And she never really gets to get like a head of steam and develop a body of work that we can track as far as being like, these are the things that make it a Karyn Kusama movie, because she's not, and I think there'll be other directors like this, but I don't think there'll be many directors like this that we cover who I think when they're allowed to have a voice, have such a strong voice and are just aren't allowed to have that voice. Right. I think.
But what is interesting
think,
about her, and I hope we see more directors like this, is that because she's been kind of kicked around by the industry so much, she's been very critical of Hollywood and the way women are treated in Hollywood specifically. And that's interesting, right? Like that's a voice that needs to be heard. Whereas Kaczynski, he's very complimentary of the system because the system has treated him so fucking good.
He's like, the system works and it's wonderful.
Absolutely. Like, I'm hanging out with Tom Cruise tonight. Like Karyn Kusama probably, like if she's ever been in a room with Tom Cruise, they probably, didn't even look at each other, right? Like this is a person who is kind of an eternal outsider in some sense, and clearly has the chops to be an A-list filmmaker, and they just won't let her take that step. And so she's been, the vitriol that she's expressed is not only, I completely sympathize with her, and I just think it's interesting, right? Like she is allowed to say things that a Joseph Kaczynski, smart guy, an interesting interview and kind of visionary filmmaker, but he'll never say that, right? He's not going to shit on Disney because they gave him his big break, right? He's not going to criticize Tom Cruise and Skydance and Paramount because, they are continuing to let him make these huge budget, like gigantic scale movies that he's very good at. And I don't know, it's interesting. Like the one time Karyn Kusama had something like a shot like that with Aeon Flux, like we saw how that turned it out. They cut the budget in half and took the movie away from
this. The first three movies do have one thing in common. They're all sort of centered around, female protagonists, and they all center around people who, are treated a certain way by society.
Yeah, I mean, even they're all feminist movies one way or another.
Yes, in one way or another they are. The Invitation, as far as I remember, is a male lead, as far as I remember from watching. I know there are female characters in it.
Yeah, it's more of an ensemble piece. It's been so long. I just remember I really liked it. I remember it has an ending that I thought was just brilliant, and I remember very little else. Well, there's one visual from that closing sequence that sticks in my head to this day, but I'm very excited to see it again. I'd like to show my wife. I think she would like it a lot. We haven't really. Well, she saw Jennifer's Body with me in 2009. She was mostly disappointed with it.
What surprised me about Kusama, and maybe I have to go back and look at the stories about when they were picking directors for movies like this. She's on those lists and just doesn't get them. But like, it feels like not because she's the right director for it, but because it was kind of Hollywood shorthand at the time. These like YA like franchise movies.
With the female leads, like a Divergent.
They never called her for a Twilight movie.
Yeah, or Twilight or like Hunger Games. Sure.
Yeah, or a Scorched Trials or a Divergent Allegiant.
I love a movie. Yep.
Yeah. The Maze Runner, the Scorched Trials. An Allegiant Divergent whole type of situation.
Maybe they did. She was like, "No, I don't want to do this."
That's what I mean. Maybe if you read those stories, they're like, who are the directors up for it? Karyn Kusama, whatever, and she turned, whatever. Also one things maybe it's just like, her vision is too strong and they want somebody who's going to fit into like a mold or whatever like that, but it just seems like those would be the kind of places where she would have popped up. It's weird. Like, again, maybe it's because probably she's a very particular exacting filmmaker that she never was on those lists for like, who's going to direct Captain Marvel?
Right.
Or whatever, like those Marvel.
Well, because she probably would have wanted to make it subversive in some way, and you just could not, like, there's no wiggle room for stuff like that, so she would have had to either really stealth it, really sneak that in, or, those movies are pretty simplistic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she is not a simplistic filmmaker.
But just one of the things where like it's interesting that like not even in those places do you hear her name brought up as like being to get her back her foot in the door.
Yeah.
Because if you make a successful movie, often you'll at least get to make another movie, and it just feels like she doesn't even get to go on that sort of journey. Not that I want that for her to end up like, a filmmaker that has like an interesting movie and then ends up directing a franchise movie and never escapes that orbit, which happens to a lot of people. But, who knows? It's funny because she's never made like Aeon Flux is kind of a disaster, but she's never made like a real out and out disaster. Like she's never made like The Book of Henry or whatever the fuck. And Colin Trevorrow still gets to make Jurassic World movies, so I don't understand what that's all about. But anyway, let's talk about The Invitation next week, which I think is a rock solid a rock solid movie, and I'm excited to talk about it. Close it out with Yellow Jackets, and then when we're doing the Yellow Jackets episode, we'll announce our...
What about Destroyer? We are going to watch Destroyer, right?
Oh, Destroyer. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm so excited for Destroyer. I'm sure I'm completely misplacing that, but yeah.
Destroyer, and then the Kusama bonus where we'll talk about Yellow Jackets. And I think what we'll do too, we'll probably, by the time those coming out, the show will be live. So we'll publish on social media like our schedule for the upcoming episodes and stuff like that. As far as release order and the directors we're doing, we picked our director after Kusama. We talked about last week.
We got an interesting one teed up for next time. Actually, two. The next two I think are going to be a lot of fun.
The next two are teed up. We're doing, we're keeping these filmographies to give people a hint, a little on the shorter side right now. 5-6 movies. But we're doing two very interesting people after that, and then after we do that, I think we're gonna do our first longer one. After we do these other two, but very interesting directors, I think, with some great movies. Like we're definitely venturing more into like stone cold great movies, and a lot of these people that we're gonna be talking about. One little prestige-y, one a little bit more genre-y. I think it's gonna be fun. So I'm looking forward to that. And you can check out all our stuff on intrepidfilmographers.substack.com. Please subscribe to the podcast, rate and review. It really helps. I really tell you, I've been doing podcasts for a really long time. There's a lot of really famous people who do podcasts. It's really hard to get noticed. Ratings and reviews do so much, especially for a new podcast. It really, really helps. So the more ratings and reviews you can leave, I know somebody feels like, oh, it's not going to help. It's not going to help if I leave a review. I'm just one person. Trust me. It all helps. So please do it.
If you're the other Gentlemen Broncos fan out in the world, maybe leave us a review, just a sympathy review for that. Well,
if you're the other Gentlemen Broncos fan out there, please stop listening to our podcast. We don't want your type.
Wait, does that mean I can't be on the podcast anymore? I like that movie.
No, you can't. You just can't listen to it. You can't listen to the podcast. Fair. Yeah. So thank you to everybody who has been listening, except those who like Gentlemen Broncos. Until next time. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Bobby.
And thank you to everybody who's been listening. Until next time, be good to one another. Later.